Chapter 369. On the mountainside of White Cloud Peak, at a place several tens of feet above the ocean of clouds, a platform poked out from the cliff. A few old trees and a large patch of wisteria could be seen growing on the stone platform, a stone table and a few stone blocks. What was even more amazing was that there were two springs flowing out from the cliff. The gurgling water circled around the platform, then plunged straight down through a gap in the cliff. The ocean of clouds was rocking, and strong winds were blowing, turning the rushing water into a thin layer of mist. The sunlight shone on the mist, drawing out a few hazy rainbows above the sea of clouds. A few white cranes could be seen flying between the rainbows, and occasionally, their cries would ring through the clouds. Immortal Greenstaff stood on the edge of the cliff happily, glancing at the surrounding scenery. He pointed his finger and said smilingly, "Jiang Yun, you've done a good job. I bet you've spent a lot of effort to build this foundation, haven't you? It has been less than 100,000 years since you left Yuanhua sect after completing your apprenticeship. Good, very good." Together with a few little Taoists, Patriarch Jiang Yun was busying himself off to the side. White Cloud Immortal Sect's best spirit tea, the best wine, and the best fruits were brought out like a stream of water, piling up on the stone table. Upon hearing Immortal Greenstaff's words, Patriarch Jiang Yun smiled and said, "If not for Master's great kindness in taking me as his disciple and teaching me a supreme magical technique, how could I be where I am today?" Immortal Greenstaff shook his head, walked back, and sat down on a stone block. Then, he picked up a purple mountain fruit and took 2 bites from it. With a muffled voice, he said, "Let's not talk about this nonsense. Years ago, you asked someone to send me a letter, telling me that you've laid down your foundation in White Cloud Planet, Liyuan Galaxy. I thought you just opened up a shabby cave abode of your own and cultivated there. Never did I expect that you've actually occupied such a large piece of land." Sighing, Immortal Greenstaff stomped his foot and said, "When you were forced out of Yuanhua sect, those." It seemed like he wanted to say something, but when he saw Wu Qi standing respectfully off to the side and staring at him from head to toe, Immortal Greenstaff shut his mouth and cleared his throat. "Let's talk about something serious. Choose a few dozen elites among your nascent divinity and nascent soul disciples to follow me back." This time, Yuanhua sect had a head-on clash with them, and your master wife was nearly disfigured because of that. Patriarch Jiang Yun's eyes went wide as he cried out sternly, "Master, I wanted to ask you just now, who is so bold as to bully Yuanhua sect?" While Immortal Greenstaff and Patriarch Jiang Yun were explaining to each other, Wu Qi pricked up his ears and listened carefully. He had heard every detail of the entire incident. Wu Qi nodded to himself in delight. His chance had come. Yuanhua sect was one of the top 10 sects in Pueyuo Heavenly Realm. Different from Minor Heavenly Circle Realm, Pueyuo Heavenly Realm was divided into 9 grades, upper grade, upper middle grade, upper lower grade, all the way to lower grade. Minor Heavenly Circle Realm was a lower grade heavenly realm. No matter it was in terms of surface area, natural energy, or resources, they were all the lowest grade. On the other hand, Pueyuo Heavenly Realm was a middle lower grade heavenly realm, and all the conditions were at least 100 times better than Minor Heavenly Circle Realm. Being ranked top 10 in Pueyuo Heavenly Realm, Yuanhua sect had 33 heaven immortals, and their founding ancestral master, Patriarch Yuanhua, had a cultivation base of peak 28th tier heaven immortal. His overall strength was one of the strongest in Pueyuo Heavenly Realm. Apart from these 33 heaven immortals, Patriarch Yuanhua also had nearly 400 nascent divinity cultivators, over 3,000 nascent soul cultivators, and many more Golden Dan and Xiantian cultivators. Yuanhua sect's overall strength was at least 100 times stronger than White Cloud Immortal sect. Just a single 28th tier heaven immortal, Patriarch Yuanhua, had the power to overturn the entire White Cloud Immortal sect in an instant. This time, Yuanhua sect was facing another immortal sect ranked top 10 in Pueyuo Heavenly Realm, the Huiling sect. Both sides had been fighting and killing each other for nearly 1,000 years. The reason was simple. At the border of Pueyuo Heavenly Realm, at the border between the territories controlled by Yuanhua sect and Huiling sect, a planet that contained a large amount of upper-grade energy stones was discovered. The planet was barren, and the environment was harsh. However, the energy stones it contained were of excellent quality, as they contained energy stones of all 5 elements. According to Patriarch Yuanhua's estimation, once all the energy stones on this planet were extracted, it would allow Yuanhua sect to have an additional 200 nascent divinity cultivators and several thousand nascent soul cultivators within 1,000 years. The prosperity of an immortal sect depended not only on the number of immortals it had, but also the number and grade of its disciples. Especially the number of nascent divinity cultivators, as it directly determined the future development potential of the immortal sect. On average, under normal circumstances, without the protection of immortal pills and spirit items, 1 or 2 out of 50 nascent divinity cultivators could transcend their thunder tribulation and become heaven immortals. With an additional 200 nascent divinity cultivators, it meant that Yuanhua sect could have an additional 4 heaven immortals in the future. On the other hand, with the addition of several thousand nascent soul cultivators, it was highly possible that the sect would have an additional 100 nascent divinity cultivators before their lifespans ran out. Therefore, both immortal sects had gone to war for the sake of this planet that contained an incredible amount of energy stone veins. Over the past 1,000 years, the 2 immortal sects had been fighting and killing each other. Most of their heaven immortal elders were severely wounded, and their overall strength was greatly reduced. Meanwhile, many of their nascent divinity and nascent soul cultivators were killed as well. Over the past 1,000 years, Yuanhua sect alone had lost 300 nascent soul cultivators, and over 20 nascent divinity cultivators were forced to reincarnate. All the other nascent divinity and nascent soul cultivators were wounded as well, and their overall strength was greatly reduced. Seeing that the 2 immortal sects were about to suffer a great loss in the fight for the energy stone veins, the immortal monarch who ruled over Puyuo heavenly realm stepped forward to mediate the dispute. Finally, they came up with a solution that would not cause any damage to both immortal sects, but could still decide the ownership of this planet. Both immortal sects swore an oath that no heaven immortal cultivators would be allowed to participate in the fight, and that both sides would pick a group of elite nascent divinity and nascent soul cultivators to have a life and death duel. These nascent divinity and nascent soul cultivators had to come from their respective immortal sections. They did not matter if they were the core disciples of the immortal sects, or the members of the organizations established by the outer sect disciples. In short, as long as they were related to the sect, they could participate in the life and death duel. Shaking his head, Immortal Greenstaff breathed out a long sigh and said, "Currently, all the elite disciples in Yuanhua sect with excellent aptitudes and overall strength are either killed or severely wounded." No matter how hard the ancestral master thought, he could not come up with any solution. Therefore, he could only seek help from you, the disciples who have just finished their apprenticeship. Twitching his lips, Immortal Greenstaff snorted coldly and said, "Jiang Yun, do you still remember those few fellow disciples who have just finished their apprenticeship with you?" Patriarch Jiang Yun rose to his feet, nodded, and said with a smile, "I remember." Shaking his head, Immortal Greenstaff sighed coldly and said, "All of them are good-for-nothings. A few of them got into a fight right after they left the sect, and ended up dead. Among the remaining 3, only one of them managed to transcend his thunder tribulation and become a heaven immortal. However, he is just an itinerant cultivator, and he does not even have a single disciple. I've searched for them for a long time, but they are really useless. In the end, I've come to you." Looking at Patriarch Jiang Yun with a hopeful expression, Immortal Greenstaff asked softly, "Do you have any useful disciples now?" Wu Qi stuck out his chest abruptly and said in a deep voice, "Ancestral Master, I'm willing to serve the sect." "Aren't they just a bunch of useless chickens and stray dogs from Huiling sect? With the sword in my hand, I'm willing to kill every single one of them." Immortal Greenstaff kept nodding and applauding, then turned to Patriarch Jiang Yun and said with a smile, "This disciple of yours is excellent." Patriarch Jiang Yun smiled and gave Wu Qi a glare. After that, he turned to Immortal Greenstaff and said, "Master, I now have over 100 nascent divinity cultivators and 1,000 nascent soul cultivators in my sect. 70% of them are my blood descendants. You can use them as you wish, Master. Immortal Green Staff pondered for a brief moment, then nodded and said, all right. For the duel this time, both sides have agreed to send 10 nascent divinity cultivators and 100 nascent soul cultivators. Patriarch Jiang Yun nodded hastily and said, with just a word from Master, I can send 10 peak stage nascent divinity cultivators and 100 peak stage nascent soul cultivators to accompany the duel. On top of that, all the magical treasures and flying swords are excellent items. I dare say, without the intervention of a heaven immortal, these disciples of mine are more than enough to deal with enemies who are a few times stronger than us. Patriarch Jiang Yun was very confident. As he had also sworn an oath, he could not reveal the existence of Myriad Immortals' planet to Immortal Green Staff. Over the past few years, relying on the abundant resources on Myriad Immortals' planet, the cultivation base of White Cloud Immortal Sect's disciples had improved at a tremendous pace. More importantly, Myriad Immortals' planet was filled with all kinds of natural treasures. As Patriarch Jiang Yun was an expert in pill concoction, all his core disciples had countless spirit pills in their hands. As a result, their ability to fight a prolonged battle and their ability to defend themselves were many times stronger than ordinary cultivators. The flying swords and magical treasures used by the disciples of White Cloud Immortals sect had also been upgraded over the past few years. Each of them now had a few decent defensive magical treasures, all crafted with rare and precious materials found on Myriad Immortals' planet. Therefore, Patriarch Jiang Yun said that his disciples could fight against cultivators who were a few times stronger than them. Immortal Green Staff was very satisfied with Patriarch Jiang Yun's attitude. He kept nodding and praising Patriarch Jiang Yun, then promised, if we can win this duel, all your disciples will have the chance to join Yuanhua sect, and be taught the true Taoist scripture of unity. Even you, Jiang Yun, were forced to leave the sect in those years. This time, I'll go all out and accept you as my inner sect disciple, no matter how shameless I am. Patriarch Jiang Yun was overjoyed. Without hesitation, he dropped to his knees and kowtowed at Immortal Green Staff. Seeing Patriarch Jiang Yun kowtow, Wu Qi had no other choice but to follow suit. He smiled bitterly in his mind, thinking that it would be a great trouble if his seniority was too low. It seemed like he would have the potential to become a kowtowing worm in the future. Immortal Green Staff helped Patriarch Jiang Yun to his feet, then began to talk to him about some things that happened in the past. Standing aside, Wu Qi could tell that Yuanhua sect was different from White Cloud Immortal sect. Because of Patriarch Jiang Yun, White Cloud Immortal sect had a harmonious internal strife, while Yuanhua sect had a lot of internal conflicts and factions, and there were many schemes and fights between them. Wu Qi nodded silently. It seemed like he would have to be extra careful when he arrived at Yuanhua sect. While he was pondering, Patriarch Jiang Yun turned to Wu Qi and said, summon all your senior brothers back at once, and ask them to leave Spirit Flame sect's territory. Don't worry about them for the time being. Return to the sect now, and prepare to set off with Master. Wu Qi quickly cupped his fist and bowed, then transformed into a beam of light and sped away. Chapter 370. Late at night, in Duke Yan Li's mansion in Ji City of Great Yan. Wu Qi and Lu Qingfeng were lying on a wooden platform in the middle of a small lake in the backyard, quietly looking at the twinkling stars in the sky. Both of them were holding wine jars in their hands, gulping down mouthfuls of wine. Just now, Wu Qi told Lu Qingfeng about some of the plans he and Yan Dan had, as well as some of the causes and consequences of the situation. Lu Qingfeng's mood was very heavy, and he kept gulping down the wine, exhaling deeply, which reeked of wine. This is going to be a dangerous journey. You have to be extra careful. After a long while, Lu Qingfeng said with a deep voice, don't worry about Great Yan. I'll keep a close watch on your star-picking city. I'll take good care of the number 1 martial club under the heaven, as well as Meng Xiaobai and the others. They are also my brothers, there won't be any slip-ups. All right, said Wu Qi in a deep voice, take care of yourself. Throwing a small and exquisite spirit breeding ring to Lu Qingfeng, Wu Qi said, this is a spirit breeding ring crafted by me. The territory inside it is a little small, about 100 acres in size. I've just recruited 100 longbow men, and each of them has transcended their thunder tribulation and formed the Jin Dan. Once they form the formation, they have the ability to kill nascent soul cultivators. Take it and protect yourself. Lu Qingfeng did not hesitate. He wore the spirit breeding ring on his finger, then pulled out a thread of natural silk from around his neck and threw it to Wu Qi along with over 30 storage rings. A long thread of natural silk and over 30 glinting storage rings. Wu Qi nearly burst out laughing at the sight. Since when did Lu Qingfeng learn this hobby of his? He sent his divine will into the storage rings, and found that over 30 storage rings, each measuring about 1,000 feet in both width and length, were filled with countless energy stones. There were top-grade, high-grade, middle-grade, and low-grade spirit stones. There were 3 storage rings worth of low-grade spirit stones, and the rest were all middle-grade and above spirit stones. Lu Qingfeng said with a smile, I've been working as the mines manager for the past few years, so there are always some benefits. Take these spirit stones with you. When you go out, you should always bring some good stuff with you. Besides, we're not poor people. How can you not bring more spirit stones when you go out? Wu Qi nodded. With a sweep of his divine will, he transferred all the energy stones in the ring into the black dragon spirit ring. A small black dragon's soul rushed out and swallowed all the storage rings one by one. The storage space within the black dragon's spirit ring expanded once again, and the black dragon's soul let out an extremely comfortable dragon roar. He patted the black dragon's soul and stuffed it back into the ring. Wu Qi jumped up and said in a low voice, I'll leave everything in the family to you, big brother. Lu Qingfeng rose to his feet and said, Don't worry, I'll take care of everything. Nodding his head, Wu Qi stepped onto a cloud and flew towards the Imperial Palace at top speed. As it was only a few miles away from the Imperial Palace, Wu Qi arrived in the Imperial Palace with a flash of the cloud. Slowly, he landed on the cloud at the entrance of the secret vault. Princess Zhang and Ma Yi were already waiting outside the secret vault. When they saw Wu Qi come down, Princess Zhang immediately flew to his side and hugged his arm without saying a word. Meanwhile, Ma Yi bowed respectfully to Wu Qi and said in a low voice, His Majesty said that Duke of Tianyun is free to allocate everything in the secret vault. Nodding his head, Wu Qi walked to the entrance of the secret vault, fished out the token of 9 swallows given to him by Yen Dan, and inserted it into the dent right in the middle of the entrance. Streams of light flowed out from the token, spreading and spreading through the thick and heavy entrance of the secret vault. The entrance opened soundlessly, revealing a sealed space about 200 feet in both width and length. 30 sinecures of Great Yen Dynasty were stationed in this place, and underneath it was a short-distance teleportation formation. Pulling Princess Zhang, Wu Qi walked into the teleportation formation. A few sinecures activated the formation and changed the coordinates of the teleportation formation. A blinding light flickered, and Wu Qi and Princess Zhang felt their bodies lightened. The scene before their eyes changed, and in the next moment, they had arrived in front of another entrance. There was no one in this place, and it was a huge cave about 1,000 feet in both width and length. Before them was a dark green door, about 100 feet in height, without any decorative patterns on it. 2 war puppets from Mo sect, each standing 100 feet tall and having a pair of dull and lifeless eyes, and their bodies forged with metal, were standing in front of the door. Scorching airwaves that could make one suffocate were emanating from their bodies. Without any hesitation, Wu Qi quickly pulled out the token of 9 swallows and showed it to the 2 puppets. Only then did he pull Princess Zhang closer to the door, using his right hand to lightly press a few times on the door. Every time Wu Qi pressed a button, a bright spot would light up on the door. Very soon, the bright spots formed the pattern of the Big Dipper. The 7 stars spun, and the door opened soundlessly, revealing the secret vault of Great Yen Dynasty behind it. This secret vault was built and expanded by Great Yen Dynasty over the last 2,000 years. It consisted of 9 floors, and each floor was about 100 miles in circumference. For the last 2,000 years, all the taxes collected by Great Yen Dynasty and the tributes from the vassal kingdoms were stored in this vault. There was one floor of the secret vault, where a huge amount of food, wine, meat, and other daily necessities were stored. The amount of food stored in this 100 miles in circumference was more than enough for Great Yen Dynasty to deal with the natural and man-made disasters from a few vassal kingdoms at the same time. Apart from the first floor of the secret vault, there was also a second floor of the secret vault that stored salt and herbs. One floor of the secret vault stored gold, and the other floor stored silver. The rest of the secret vault stored various natural treasures that Great Yen Dynasty had plundered over the years, as well as various rare and precious materials that could only be used by cultivators. After entering the secret vault, Wu Qi stood directly at the entrance of the secret vault, where all kinds of rare and precious metals were stored. Ripples emerged from his body, as 18 celestial fiend puppets walked out from Wu Qi's body while laughing in a deep voice. Their faces looked exactly the same as Wu Qi's, and they all had an excited smile on their faces. Wu Qi pointed at the secret vault, breathed out a long sigh and said, "Don't save any money for Great Yen Dynasty. Devour as much as you can. Store as much as you can in your body. Try your best to refine them, and make your cultivation base improve as soon as possible. I have 2 nascent souls now, and both of them have the cultivation base of peak stage nascent soul realm. Do your best." The 18 celestial fiend puppets let out excited cries, then dashed into the secret vault while leaving afterimages in their wake. Very soon, noises that sounded like mice gnawing on soybeans could be heard echoing out from the secret vault. Amidst the cracking noises, the rare and precious metals that Great Yen Dynasty had stored for so many years were being consumed at an incredible speed. Paying no attention to the 18 celestial fiend puppets, Wu Qi came before the entrance of the secret vault, where demon beasts' inner cores, blood essence, furs, and bones were stored. A white light flickered from the spirit breeding ring, as Gold Horn and Silver Horn rushed out while drooling. Then came Long Yuan and 10,000 long bow men. Pointing his finger at the secret vault, Wu Qi said in a deep voice, "Empty them. Swallow whatever you can now, and as for those you can't, choose those that are convenient to store and take them away. We don't know when we can come back, and it will be very difficult for us to collect so many good things when we are away from home." Gold Horn and Silver Horn let out a joyful cry, then led a group of long bow men and rushed into the city like hungry wolves and tigers. Just as Wu Qi had said, when they were away from home in the future, it would be nearly impossible for them to collect so many materials. How many materials could Wu Qi collect alone, even if he worked as a miner every day? Great Yen Dynasty was an enormous dynasty, and it had over 2,000 years of savings. If Wu Qi did not help him spend some, he would feel sorry for the agreement he had reached with Yen Dan. After that, Wu Qi brought Princess Xianglu and came to the secret vault that stored all kinds of spirit herbs. Wu Qi strode into the vault and scanned the surroundings with his divine will. Regardless of the quality, he grabbed all the materials that he knew could be used in the ancient prescription, and sent them into the Black Dragon spirit ring. Hastily, the Black Dragon soul sorted these herbs into different categories, neatly divided them into different storage spaces, and stored them properly. The efficiency of divine will was much faster than manual labor. In just 1 hour, Wu Qi had searched through all the spirit herbs stored in this secret vault, taking away 30% of the spirit herbs. Among them, there were several million kilograms of spirit herbs that could be used to concoct the 9th-grade drunken dragon incense. Wu Qi had made up his mind that he would make good use of an unorthodox pill like the drunken dragon incense in the future. After he was done with all the spirit herbs, Wu Qi entered another level of the vault, where all kinds of strange and rare items were stored. Even an old demon like Xiong Wanling could not identify them. Although these items were very strange, in Wu Qi's eyes, their functions were very clear. There were illustrated documents of all kinds of natural treasures in Scroll of Stealing, and as long as they were valuable, nothing could hide from Wu Qi. Like a mouse falling into a rice vat, Wu Qi had plundered more than half of these strange and rare treasures. Except for some items that he did not really like, he had taken all the rest. After working for a whole day and night, Wu Qi finally let out a clear cry. With heavy steps, the 18 celestial fiend puppets returned to Wu Qi's side. Without saying a word, they fused back into Wu Qi's body. Wu Qi could clearly sense that these celestial fiend puppets had eaten too much. Apart from the rare metals that they could digest now, they had also opened up a rather large storage space in their bodies, storing a large amount of rare metals in it. This took up a great deal of their strength, and it made it difficult for them to move around. Led by Long Yuan, the long bow men returned with bags of different sizes. Some of them were bleeding from their noses. In order to quickly improve their cultivation base, these big fellows had devoured some demon cores and other treasures from some powerful demon beasts, and as a result, blood was dripping from their noses. But, Gold Horn and Silver Horn were in the most difficult situation. They were carried out by Long Yuan with their eyes rolled up. Two greedy pythons were coughing out mouthfuls of blood, which was filled with all kinds of strange flames and emanating surging waves of energy. Both brothers had eaten too much. When had they ever seen a storehouse filled with demon cores, blood essence, and other treasures that could greatly replenish one's energy and improve one's cultivation base? They did not care whether their bodies could withstand it, and had devoured several hundred demon cores from nascent soul demon beasts in one go. The consequence was that their bodies nearly exploded, and their internal organs were nearly cooked. However, as both brothers possessed the bloodline of an ancient species, although they were about to die from overeating, their life force was extremely strong, and they were hanging on to their last breath. Wu Qi felt relieved after checking their condition, and shoved them back into the spirit breeding ring. One after another, the long bow men walked back into the ring. Wu Qi pondered for a brief moment, then took away a large amount of gold, silver, jewelry, grains, wine, and rice from the secret cave. Only then did he leave the secret vault with Princess Zhanglu contentedly. Yan Dan and Yan Qijuan were waiting outside the secret vault. Chapter 371. The starlight was as cold as ice. Not a single light could be seen in the vast Great Yan Imperial Palace. Only the starlight that was as clear as ice sprinkled down, illuminating the surroundings. Clad in ordinary black robes, Yan Dan and Yan Qijuan stood in front of the secret vault. The night breeze brushed against their clothes, making them look like ghosts, and filled with an indescribable eeriness. Seeing Wu Qi and Princess Zhanglu come out, Yan Dan said in a deep voice, "Be careful and prudent during this long journey." Yan Qijuan nodded and said, "This place has become a troublesome place, and it is a good opportunity for us to travel far away. But, we can still help you to maintain the peace here on Myriad Immortals planet. When you are out there, there are countless mighty experts in the world. Remember to be careful and prudent when you swallow your anger." Wu Qi nodded slowly. Then, he fixed his eyes on Princess Zhanglu and said, "Zi Xian, especially you. You have to listen to Wu Qi in everything." Princess Zhanglu nodded silently, and her eyes turned slightly red. After a brief moment of silence, Wu Qi fished out a jade slip from under his sleeve and handed it to Yan Dan. "These are some of Wu Qi's men, some connections that can be used, and some temporary life-saving measures. Since we are leaving Myriad Immortals planet, these arrangements will not be of use for the time being. I'll leave them to your majesty." In the jade slip, Wu Qi left behind all the passageways to his life-saving cave abodes, as well as the information about Duke of Longyang, Zhao Kuo, the 3 sinecures of Zhao State, and those who were friends or colluded with him, as well as the information about his 2 disciples from Gu Tai dynasty. All of them were given to Yan Dan by Wu Qi. Wu Qi believed that with Yan Dan's experience and knowledge, he would be able to maximize the value of these information. When he sent his divine will into the jade slip and gave it a glance, he was taken aback by what he saw. Staring at Wu Qi in astonishment, he cried out, "Little brat, why did you leave behind so many secret caves for escaping? People say that a cunning rabbit has 3 burrows, but you have more than 3. Laughing dryly, Wu Qi pulled Princess Zhongli's little hand and said awkwardly, "I'm afraid of death, that's all." Yan Dan shook his head, pointed his finger at Wu Qi, and scolded him with a smile. He gladly memorized all the information in the jade slip, then crushed it with his palm. Without saying anything else, Wu Qi pulled Princess Zhanglu and walked out of the imperial palace step by step. Yan Dan and Yan Qijuan followed beside them, their hands clasped behind their back as they walked step by step. Princess Xianglu pursed her lips and leaned on Wu Qi. Although her expression was still firm, her steps were a little weak. After all, she was still young, but due to various reasons, she had to leave her hometown and go to the unfathomable outer realm. Not to mention a little girl like Princess Xianglu, even a man would not feel good when he was asked to abandon everything at home and travel to a faraway place. When they came to the entrance of the imperial palace, Yan Dan suddenly said, "Don't worry, just go and do what you need to do. You don't need to interfere in the internal affairs of Great Yan." A few months ago, when the palace was purged, all the disciples of Great Sun's sect who were hiding in the palace were killed, and all the spies from Yu Academy were wiped out as well. Great Yan will always stand behind you. No matter what help you need, Great Yan will give it our best. Wu Qi frowned and asked, "Since all the disciples of Great Sun's sect who were hiding in the imperial palace were killed, where is Lao Ai?" Yan Dan shook his head and said in a deep voice, "I don't think Lao Ai is that easy to deal with." Upon hearing that, Wu Qi knew immediately that Lao Ai was hiding somewhere, and that Great Yan dynasty had not done anything to him. Nodding his head, Wu Qi sighed and said, "This man is an evildoer. When you have the chance to strike ruthlessly, you must never be soft-hearted. Otherwise, the things he will do will be unbearable." Both Yan Dan and Yan Qijuan had an unsightly expression on their faces. What Wu Qi said was exactly what they were thinking. Lao Ai's cultivation base was not that strong, and it was not a big deal for him to use his divine abilities and dermic powers. Even though he was backed by Su Meier, Mod, and Sun Kuang, Su Meier dared not to do anything reckless. But, Lao Ai's divine abilities and dermic powers were extremely evil, and the things he did were really unbearable. Once he messed up the imperial palace, even if they could kill him in the end, once his reputation spread out, Yan Dan and Yan Qijuan would not look good. With a wry smile, Yan Qijuan clenched his jaws and said, "Kill Lao Ai with all the strength of the entire dynasty. Release all the things he has done. Even if it brings shame to us, I want to make sure that no one under the heaven dares to take him in. With what happened to Ying Zhang's mother as an example, I want to see who among the 6 dynasties dares to take him in." Yan Dan laughed bitterly and shook his head. Then, he patted on Wu Qi's shoulder and said loudly, "Let's go. Go now, and do what you need to do. Great Yan is here, and as long as it does not fall, you will be able to get all the support you need from Great Yan." Wu Qi nodded his head heavily. He gave Yan Dan a look and thought of Yan Dan's nascent divinity, which was shrouded in a dark mist and imprisoned by countless bone spikes. Then, he turned to look at Yan Qijuan. Perhaps, his nascent soul was in the same state as well. Then, he turned to look at Princess Xianglu, whose face was as beautiful as a blooming flower, but with a pale and unsightly face. His heart felt heavy and uncomfortable. One of the reasons why Wu Qi had decided to leave with Immortal Green Staff was to find a reliable almighty expert and release the shackles on Yan Dan and the other's nascent divinity. Another reason was that Wu Qi was also imprisoned by Lady Dark Goldwater's Dark Een soul captivation. If he could not find an almighty expert to help him, or if Wu Qi could not break through the cultivation base of Gold Immortal in just 1,000 years, his soul would perish and perish 1,000 years later. Wu Qi did a quick calculation. If he stayed on Myriad Immortal's planet, the chances of him breaking through the cultivation base of Gold Immortal realm within 1,000 years was less than 30%. Only by leaving Myriad Immortal's planet and plunging into a wider world could he find a slim chance of success. Wu Qi had a strong confidence that he would not die because of the Dark Een soul captivation. However, he had to struggle with all his might for that slim chance of survival. Only then could he truly escape from the shadow of death. After bidding farewell to Yan Dan and Yan Qijuan, Wu Qi brought Princess Xianglu and stepped onto a white cloud and flew up into the sky. As he flew up into the sky, Wu Qi saw Lu Buwei standing on top of a tall building with a courtyard not far away. With his hands clasped behind his back, he was looking at them with a gloomy face. Wu Qi just gave Lu Buwei a cold glance, then turned his head away and ignored him. Now, Wu Qi no longer took Lu Buwei seriously. After killing a few heaven immortals on Shui Yuan planet, Wu Qi's vision had become very high. So, what could Lu Buwei do to him? Don't come looking for trouble with me in the future, or I'll wipe out your entire clan. Staring at Lu Buwei, Wu Qi transmitted his voice to him in a cold voice. Lu Buwei stared back at Wu Qi with an unchanged expression, not showing any fear or hesitation. Wu Qi grinned coldly and did not say another word. After returning to Duke Yan Li's mansion, Wu Qi woke up Catfish Flood Dragon, who was sleeping soundly with her head covered, and Lord Xiansheng, who was sitting cross-legged and regulating his breath. Wu Qi did not know what to say to both of them. Lord Xiansheng was a loyal man. When he heard that Wu Qi was going to leave for Pulyuo Heavenly Realm, fearing that Wu Qi would suffer in the outside world, he simply wanted to follow Wu Qi on a journey, saying that he wanted to gain some experience. Lord Xiansheng was a loyal man, as he had abandoned his territory and followed Wu Qi on a long journey. Of course, it might also be because Waining Dragon King had asked him to do so. This cunning old man was not a kind man. Most likely, he had taken a fancy to Wu Qi's potential, and had wholeheartedly wanted his son to follow Wu Qi. Perhaps, he would be able to have a better and better development. As for Catfish Flood Dragon, Wu Qi had no idea why she wanted to follow him. Just listen to her excuse, if I follow Wu Qi and Princess Xianglu, there will be food for me. Is that still a reasonable excuse? Does it mean that I, Wu Qi, am the owner of a black inn, who would sneak attack people all day long and throw them to Catfish Flood Dragon to eat? But, it's not a bad thing, thought Wu Qi to himself. With Catfish Flood Dragon following him, it would be very easy for him to destroy the body after he killed someone. He could just throw the body to her and let her eat it. Even the hair would be melted by her strong digestive ability, and it would save Wu Qi the trouble of doing it himself. Gulp. A living person is gone just like that. How convenient is that? Without disturbing Lu Qingfeng, who was sleeping soundly after getting drunk, Wu Qi and his company were teleported to Tsang-Ao Immortal Abode through the teleportation formation in the Imperial Palace, and then arrived at White Cloud Planet through the teleportation formation constructed by White Cloud Immortal Sect. At this point in time, Patriarch Jiang Yun had already selected a group of elite disciples. Together with Wu Qi, Princess Xianglu, Lord Xiansheng, and Catfish Flood Dragon, there were 10 peak stage nascent divinity cultivators and 100 peak stage nascent soul disciples. He left the internal affairs of the sect to ancestral masters Qing Xia and Bai Wu, and decided to personally lead the team back to Yuanhua sect with Immortal Green Staff. The trip was a major event that would decide whether Patriarch Jiang Yun could be promoted as an inner sect disciple of Yuanhua sect, and also his future achievement. Therefore, he dared not to neglect it, and naturally, he had to lead the team himself. When immortal cultivators traveled, they did not have as many complicated problems as mortals. Bringing with them 110 disciples, Immortal Green Staff and Patriarch Jiang Yun strode into White Cloud Immortal Sect's Grand Universal Teleportation Formation. After that, Immortal Green Staff fished out over 100 upper-grade energy stones and inserted them into the formation, then used his divine will to locate a distant destination in the formation. The destination they were heading to was the core of Minor Heavenly Circle Realm, the place where the Immortal Monarch's immortal abode was located. Traveling from Minor Heavenly Circle Realm to Pulyuo Heavenly Realm was a teleportation across heavenly realms. The distance was extremely far, and it would take a very long time to arrive at Pulyuo Heavenly Realm with an ordinary Grand Universal Teleportation Formation. Only in the immortal abode of the immortal monarch of each heavenly realm was a public teleportation formation that could teleport someone from one heavenly realm to another in a blink of an eye. The company stood in the teleportation formation. Looking at Qing Xia and Bai Wu outside the formation, Patriarch Jiang Yun said in a deep voice, "I'll leave everything in the clan to you, my wives." Qing Xia and Bai Wu said together, "Rest assured, my husband. Nothing will go wrong in the clan." All three ancestral masters were very confident that even though Patriarch Jiang Yun had left, White Cloud Immortal Sect and Tranquil Vimla Sect still had tens of heaven immortals guarding them. Any power that wanted to take advantage of them would be beaten badly, and there was no need for them to worry about the clan. Immortal Green Staff gave a few loud laughs, then waved his hand and cast out a spirit beam, activating the teleportation formation. A blinding light flashed, and the company disappeared from the teleportation formation. Wu Qi felt a tremendous pressure coming at him. Without hesitation, he grabbed Princess Zhang Lu and hugged her tightly. In just the time to finish a pot of tea, the company's eyes lit up, and their bodies felt heavy. They had arrived at a strange place. Chapter 372. The person in charge of this place was an immortal monarch from the heaven who possessed the cultivation base of 34th tier heaven immortal, Immortal Li He. Under his command were 2 immortal officials with the cultivation base of 35th tier, 8 heaven immortals with the cultivation base of 36th tier, and the rest of the officials were all in nascent divinity realm. Apart from them, their families and clansmen also lived here, and the total population was less than 30,000. Immortal Ku He opened his mouth and shot out a sword beam, thrusting towards Wu Qi's head. As for the density of natural energy here, it was slightly weaker than Myriad Immortals' planet, but it was not a huge difference. Although Minor Heavenly Circle Realm was a lower-tier heavenly realm, it still had a large number of energy veins, and the total amount of natural energy it produced every day was also quite high. More importantly, it was a vast place with a large number of energy veins. But, correspondingly, the population of humans and beasts here was very small. After obtaining Lady Dark Goldwater's memory, Wu Qi had gained a deeper understanding of the official positions of the Celestial Court. There were 3 lotus flowers on the white jade medallion, the symbol of a 34th tier immortal official. A 34th tier immortal official, who was responsible for the management of a remote place like Minor Heavenly Circle Realm, was roughly equivalent to a village official on Earth, a deputy official of a poor village at the national level. Perhaps, a blink of an eye had passed, or perhaps a few days and nights had passed. In any case, during the high-speed journey, the concept of time had been lost. Immortal Green Staff was taken aback, then suddenly burst into laughter. You are indeed a wild dog. The total number of energy veins in this vast Minor Heavenly Circle realm was at least 10 times that of Myriad Immortals planet and White Cloud planet combined. However, the population here was very small, and after careful cleansing, apart from the family members of immortal officials and minor officials like Immortal Li He, there was not even a single demon beast in this place. As a result, the natural energy consumption was very low, and after years of accumulation, the total amount of natural energy here was about the same as that of Myriad Immortals planet. Immortal Green Staff smiled and was about to say something, but all of a sudden, a strong light burst out from another teleportation formation next to him, from which came a group of people. Upon seeing Immortal Green Staff, Immortal Li He's face was immediately filled with a big smile. Without hesitation, he came to greet them, cupped his fist, and said, "Senior, Immortal, you are finally back. Smooth journey. Good journey. Are these fellow Taoists yours?" Suddenly seeing a piece of immortal stone here, Wu Qi felt an itch in his heart. He wished he could snatch it away. Among the group of people, a middle-aged Taoist who was less than 5 feet tall and as skinny as firewood rolled his eyes, and a faint flame flickered in his eyes. He glanced over and suddenly burst into laughter. "Green Blockhead, is your woman's face fine? TSK, is my Dharma treasure easy to enjoy?" Upon seeing the man who emerged from the teleportation formation, Immortal Green Staff's expression flickered abruptly as he slammed the wooden staff in his hand onto the ground. The most precious thing about celestial stones was that after the celestial energy in the celestial stone was drained, as long as it was placed in a place filled with celestial energy, it would recover all of its celestial energy after a period of time. This was equivalent to a battery that could be recharged indefinitely. Although the charging time was slightly longer, its value was still there. Compared to ordinary spirit stones that would turn into useless stones after being drained, immortal stones were much more precious. A total of 180 upper-grade energy stones. 120 upper-grade energy stones were used by Wu Qi and his company for the teleportation, while the other 60 were paid to Puyo Heavenly Realm as the toll fee. The few nascent divinity cultivators dared not to slight Immortal Green Staff. They kept addressing him as Senior Immortal, respectfully asking him if he was here to pay a visit to Immortal Chuan, or if he had other important matters to attend to. A portion of immortal energy was equal to the power of 10,000 portions of supreme-grade energy after being purified. Theoretically, the value of an immortal stone was equal to 10,000 supreme-grade energy stones of the same size. It was not hard to imagine how valuable an immortal stone was. Yanhe, why can I see you everywhere? Immortal Green Staff took the initiative to provoke him. Wu Qi's pupils constricted to the size of a needle tip as he stared at the immortal stone without blinking. When Wu Qi and his company walked out from the teleportation formation, a young immortal clad in a purple robe was already waiting outside. He was wearing a white jade medallion on his waist, engraved with 3 vivid lotus flowers. Wisps of immortal energy were constantly coming out from the medallion and coiling around the young immortal. This immortal was none other than the immortal monarch of Minor Heavenly Circle Realm, who was in charge of this part of the starry sky, Immortal Li He. Immortal Li He nodded hastily, carefully flattering Wu Qi and his company, then invited Wu Qi and his company to follow him to a cave abode a few miles away. An extremely complicated teleportation formation was constructed here, with a total of 36 layers of formation diagrams. Embedded in the center of the formation was not an ordinary energy stone, but a pale golden immortal stone, about the size of a human head, emanating a faint immortal energy. There were 2 ways to obtain an immortal stone. One was produced in a rare energy vein, which was formed by the condensation of immortal energy. The other was produced in the best energy stone vein, where it had to be compressed and condensed for at least 1 eons before it could produce an immortal stone. Either way, the preciousness of an immortal stone was self-evident. The Minor Heavenly Circle realm where Wu Qi and his company were currently located was a roughly rectangular landmass, measuring about 1 billion miles in length, 500 million miles in width, and 100 million miles in thickness. The gravity here was at least 10 times stronger than that of Myriad Immortals' planet. If an ordinary person were to come to this place abruptly, the sudden increase in gravity could easily crush him to death. Immortal Green Staff only gave him a brief laugh, but Immortal Li He had already answered hastily, "Don't worry, don't worry. Patriarch Jiang Yun of White Cloud Immortal Sect. If I knew Patriarch Jiang Yun is your disciple, I would have paid a visit to you long ago. Don't worry, from now on, the affairs of White Cloud Immortal Sect will be my own affair. Don't worry." Immortal Kuhi flew into a rage. Pointing his finger at Wu Qi, he bellowed, "Ignorant kid, you're courting death." With the huge landmass, Minor Heavenly Circle Realm, as its core, several dozens of galaxies of various sizes orbited around it in the vast void. Liyuan Galaxy was one of these galaxies, and it was the smallest and most remote one among them. Even so, Liyuan Galaxy still had several hundred planets suitable for cultivators to live on, and several dozens of immortal sects of various sizes. Nominally, all these planets and immortal sects were under the jurisdiction of Immortal Li He of Minor Heavenly Circle Realm. In front of Immortal Li He, Immortal Green Staff could always put on the appearance of a mighty senior, but when he arrived here, he kept a much lower profile. With a smile on his face, he cupped his fist and bowed to a few nascent divinity cultivators stationed at the edge of the teleportation formation. After that, he paid the required amount of upper-grade energy stones. Energy stones were the amalgamation of natural energies. Even heaven immortals could extract energy from energy stones to improve their cultivation base. However, for existences above the realm of heaven immortals, such as gold immortals, energy stones were just like firewood on the roadside, an auxiliary consumable for them. What gold immortals needed was not energy stones, but immortal stones that were formed purely from immortal energy. Wu Qi was laughing in his mind. It seemed like these immortals were the same as mortals, people who fawned on the rich and powerful. Immortal Green Staff came from Puyo Heavenly Realm and Yuanhua Sect. Therefore, Immortal Li He had to pay the energy stones needed for the normal maintenance of the teleportation formation with his own money, and he was an official immortal officer of the Celestial Court. Puyo Heavenly Realm was a middle-lower tier heavenly realm, 30 times longer than Minor Heavenly Circle Realm. The person stationed here was a 25th tier heaven immortal officially appointed by the celestial court, Immortal Chuan. He had nearly 100 heaven immortal subordinates, and over 1,000 nascent divinity officials. The density of natural energy here was comparable to that of Myriad Immortals' planet, and even slightly exceeded it. The gravity here was extremely strong as well, 15 times stronger than that of Myriad Immortals' planet. Fixing his gaze at the immortal stone, Wu Qi pulled Princess Zhang Li's hand and followed behind Immortal Greenstaff, walking into the huge and complicated teleportation formation. Wu Qi scanned the surroundings with his divine will, memorizing the key points of this teleportation formation. There was no description about this teleportation formation in the Scroll of Stealing. Obviously, the history of this teleportation formation was not as ancient as the shadowy figure who passed it to Wu Qi. Therefore, it was reasonable that he did not know anything about it. Although Wu Qi had countless energy stones with him, he did not have even one immortal stone. Indifferently, Immortal Greenstaff said, "This is Patriarch Jiang Yun, the founding ancestral master of White Cloud Immortal Sect in Liyuan Galaxy, and also the youngest disciple of Lao Tzu. All these kids are Jiang Yun's disciples and grand disciples. Immortal Monarch, if anything happens to them in the future, Minor Heavenly Circle Realm was one of the lower-tier heavenly realms in the universe. He had no idea how many low-tier heavenly realms there were in the universe. Among all the land masses that were shattered and drifted away from Panga continent, they were the smallest, the most dilapidated, the ones with the least resources, and the thinnest natural energy. Suddenly, the pressure from all directions came pressing at them. Wu Qi could not help but let out a muffled snort. A stream of energy burst out of his body, transforming into a light barrier that shielded him and Princess Xianglu. The light barrier kept shaking and fluctuating, and there were a few times when it was nearly crushed by the pressure. Wu Qi glanced around and found that everyone had unleashed their magical treasures to protect themselves, especially Catfish Flood Dragon. She had unleashed the custom-made hammer and hovered above her head, shrouded in a pitch-black watery light. It looked like she was the most relaxed and carefree person. Immortal Greenstaff gave a cold snort, then abruptly unleashed a large sheet of green light from the wooden staff in his hand. Immortal Greenstaff answered indifferently, then tilted his head up and said, "Adjust the teleportation formation to Puyo Heaven. We need to get back as soon as possible." All of a sudden, a bright light shone before their eyes, and their bodies suddenly sank. Wu Qi and his company had arrived in a beautiful landscape. They were surrounded by mountains, and amidst the mountains was a lush green lake. There was an island in the lake, and the teleportation formation Wu Qi and his company were in was built right on this island. Wu Qi rolled his eyes, pointing his finger at Daoist Kuhi as he scolded jokingly, "Where did this wild dog come from? Is it trying to bite people?" But, as Immortally he and Immortal Greenstaff were here, Wu Qi dared not to attack them recklessly. Because of his relationship with Immortal Greenstaff, Immortally he dared not say another word. Very attentively, he invited the company into the teleportation formation. After that, he did not ask Immortal Greenstaff for the usual toll. Instead, he fished out a large number of upper-grade energy stones from his own pocket and embedded them into the formation. After that, he bowed to Immortal Greenstaff smilingly and took his leave, then activated the formation. There were countless energy veins on Myriad Immortals' planet, but the only place with immortal energy was Tsang-Ao Immortal Abode. On top of that, Tsang-Ao Immortal Abode was not an innate energy vein, but an immortal energy that was forcibly condensed and transformed into natural energy by someone using the energy condensing and immortal ascension ball. Therefore, it did not produce any immortal stones. Chapter 373. As the sword beam approached, a cold breeze shot out in all directions. Immortal Kuhi's flying sword was a lower-grade immortal item of pretty good quality. It had a red hue, but was emanating a faint cold breeze. Vaguely, there was a foot-long flood dragon twisting and turning amidst the sword beam. Obviously, the item spirit in the sword was the soul of a flood dragon. Showing no sign of weakness, Wu Qi met the attack head-on. With a flick of his left wrist, 3 golden dragon scales shot out and smashed onto Immortal Kuhi's immortal sword. Flying swords were known for their sharpness, not their weight. Each of Wu Qi's golden dragon scales weighed at least 50,000 kilograms, and they were extremely sharp. Driven by the magnetic force, they flew at an incredible speed. 3 loud booms rang out as the dragon scales were knocked back. Wu Qi felt a tremendous counterforce coming at him, making him feel a warm sensation in his chest as he coughed out a mouthful of blood. Immortal Kuhi, on the other hand, let out a wild cry as his face turned pale with fright. His body trembled 3 times, and the sword beam was knocked far away by the golden dragon scales that weighed as heavy as a mountain. A trickle of blood slowly rolled down from his nostrils, but he quickly wiped it off with his sleeve. Immortal Green Staff was so happy that he was dancing and laughing out loud. Pointing his finger at Immortal Kuhi, he said, "Kuhi, Kuhi. You are a heaven immortal, but your sword beam was knocked off course by my grand disciple. You are bleeding from the nose because of my grand disciple. If this were to spread out, are you going to hang yourself, slit your throat, eat poison, or jump into the river? If you don't kill yourself, how can Huiling sect continue to exist in Puyo heavenly realm?" Immortal Kuhi stared blankly at Wu Qi, then suddenly coughed out a mouthful of blood. He was caught unprepared by Wu Qi's earth element dragon scale shield, and never thought that Wu Qi would have such an extraordinary treasure with him. Therefore, Immortal Kuhi had suffered a little loss. The innate earth element energy essence was extremely heavy, and its nature was the most condensed. As it was controlled by Wu Qi and smashed onto the sword beam, the item spirit in the flying sword was shaken violently. As a result, Immortal Kuhi was slightly affected, and a trickle of blood trickled out from his nostrils. The injury was not a big deal, but Immortal Green Staff's words were sharp. As a heaven immortal, he was wounded by a young lad with a cultivation base of peak stage nascent soul realm. More importantly, this young lad was Immortal Green Staff's grand disciple. Immortal Kuhi howled in exasperation, coughing out a mouthful of blood as he took a step forward abruptly. A large sheet of pale red cold air sprayed out from his body as he leaped towards Wu Qi with an evil gleam in his eyes. He roared angrily, "Brat, I'm going to grind your bones into ashes, dismember your body into 1,000 pieces, and collect your soul. I'll make you wail in pain day and night, unable to reincarnate." Immortal Green Staff took a step to the side and stood in front of Immortal Kuhi. Trying to touch Lao Tzu's grand disciple. Lao Tzu is not dead yet. A bright green light shone from the wooden staff in his hand as Immortal Green Staff casually threw it out. Abruptly, the staff transformed into a green beam of light and flew up into the sky. In just a blink of an eye, a huge tree with luxuriant branches and leaves, standing 1,000 feet tall and requiring a few people to wrap their arms around it, emerged in midair. As Old Man Green Staff began to recite an incantation under his breath, the branches of the tree began to sway. Abruptly, countless leaves as sharp as blades spun and flew down from the branches, thrusting towards Immortal Kuhi. The leaves were like blades, slicing through the air and producing a crisp hissing noise. There was a rune blinking on each green leaf. With his eyesight, Wu Qi could clearly see that these runes were the Talisman of Sharpness, one of the immortal characters. With the help of these runes, although the leaves were formed from the wood element energies, their sharpness was comparable to ordinary sharp weapons. Staring at the leaves that were falling from the sky, Immortal Kuhi did not have the time to strike. He gave a furious howl as the flying sword flew up once again, transforming into a long beam of light and shooting towards the leaves. Off to the side, Wu Qi kept shaking his head. It was easy to tell who was stronger between Immortal Kuhi and Immortal Green Staff with just a single glance. Immortal Green Staff was using the spirit-gathering illusory technique, which was an ultimate technique of immortal magic. On the other hand, Immortal Kuhi was using a sword beam to fight against the enemy. Judging from the level of his sword control, he was at the level of an earth immortal of nascent soul realm. Although Immortal Kuhi had the cultivation base of a heaven immortal, his attainment in magic and divine abilities was really weak. As expected, the sword beam could only block off half of the leaves. When the leaves and the sword beam collided, a deafening boom rang out like a thunderstorm. The sword beam trembled violently, and the sky was filled with green specks of light that drifted in the air after being crushed by the leaves. On the other hand, the other half of the leaves spun and thrust towards Immortal Kuhi while emanating an eerie cold air. Immortal Kuhi tilted his head up, clenched his jaws and said, "Green wood, this is all you have." With a cold snort, a red gleam flickered in his eyes. A glinting handkerchief embroidered with the pattern of the 8 trigrams emerged from the top of his head, unleashing a large sheet of cloud that wrapped around his body. Streams of cloud were as clear as flowing water, with countless wisps of mist rising from them. When the leaves fell on the cloud, they could only penetrate 2 to 3 inches deep into the cloud before they were shredded by the flowing cloud and mist. Laughing complacently, Immortal Kuhi said arrogantly, "This is the defensive immortal treasure I just found last month, the Cloud Radiance handkerchief. Green wood, I used to be afraid of you, but with this defensive immortal treasure, I'd like to see what you can do to me now." Staring at the arrogant and complacent Immortal Kuhi, Wuqi stealthily pulled out a white immortal talisman. Before he could unleash the talisman, Patriarch Jiang Yun had already stealthily shoved a white talisman into Wuqi's hand and said, "The talisman you have is not powerful enough. This is an upper-grade immortal talisman that I've meticulously crafted using many precious materials this year. It was crafted by me and your master's wives, and its power is at least 3 times stronger than that one. Use this talisman and teach him a good lesson." With an evil smile on his face, Patriarch Jiang Yun turned away. Wuqi took over the immortal talisman with a strange smile, then slowly took 2 steps forward. Laughing, Wuqi cried out fiercely, "Immortal Kuhi, aren't you just relying on an immortal treasure to protect yourself? Don't even ask my ancestral patriarch to do it himself, as even I, Wuqi, can deal with you easily. Hehe, look at my immortal talisman." With a wave of his hand, Wuqi injected a stream of energy into the immortal talisman, exerting all its power with all his might. Abruptly, the immortal talisman crafted by Patriarch Jiang Yun, Immortal Qing Xia, and Immortal Bai Wu transformed into a ball of immortal light the size of a water tank. Countless tiny wisps of cloud shot out from it, blotting out the sky as they shot forward at top speed. A loud boom rang out as the countless wisps of cloud collided with Immortal Kuhi's defensive cloud light handkerchief. The handkerchief immediately rippled violently. Obviously, it had suffered a tremendous impact. Immortal Kuhi was so angry that he began to curse and roar furiously, "Are all of you dead men? He has his disciples to help him in a fight, but what about you?" The dozens of nascent divinity and nascent soul cultivators following behind Immortal Kuhi were struck with a sudden realization. But, Patriarch Jiang Yun took a step forward without saying a word, unleashing an immortal pressure. In an instant, all the dozens of cultivators behind Immortal Kuhi were frozen on the spot, and none of them could move anymore. When it came to a fight between heaven immortals, whichever side had an extra heaven immortal would have an absolute strategic advantage. It was the case for Patriarch Jiang Yun today. Princess Xianglu smiled faintly. An auspicious green light was spinning gently between her palms, and the wood element energies within 1,000 miles suddenly began to fluctuate violently. Following Princess Xiangli's will, an enormous amount of wood element energies kept pouring into the huge tree hovering above Immortal Greenstaff's head. In just a blink of an eye, the tree had grown to a towering tree that stood 10,000 feet tall, and its power had increased by more than 10 times. Immortal Greenstaff was taken aback, and then he cried out in wild joy, "Kuhi, you deserve the bad luck today." On the other side, Immortal Kuhi cursed at the top of his voice, "Damn it! How did your cultivation base suddenly increase so much? This doesn't make sense. This doesn't make sense." Before his voice could fade away, the huge tree shook violently. Countless green leaves spun down from the sky and gathered into a palm-sized leaf in midair, spinning gracefully as it drifted down from the sky. The trajectory of the leaf was extremely mysterious. Although Immortal Kuhi's flying sword had been spinning and slashing 39 times in a row, he could not even touch the edge of the leaf. The leaf gently landed on Immortal Kuhi's body. The defensive strength of the 8 trigrams Cloud Radiance handkerchief, which had been weakened by more than half by Wu Qi's immortal talisman, was pierced through by the leaf. Amidst a frightening tearing noise, the leaf swept past Immortal Kuhi's left shoulder, forcefully chopping off half of his shoulder and one of his arms. Golden immortal blood splashed and splattered in all directions. Immortal Kuhi howled with pain as he took a few steps back in a sorry state. Before the power of the immortal talisman in Wu Qi's hand could be fully unleashed, a large sheet of cloud shot out like a great tidal wave and smashed viciously onto Immortal Kuhi's body. Struck by the rapidly flowing cloud, countless bloody wounds suddenly opened up all over his body. Golden blood sprayed out from the wounds and splashed onto the faces of all the cultivators behind him. In just a blink of an eye, Immortal Kuhi had been badly beaten by the cloud, and nearly all the muscles on the front of his body had been shattered. Seeing that Immortal Kuhi's immortal body was about to be destroyed by the power of the immortal talisman, he let out a miserable howl. Abruptly, a jade pendant hanging on his waist broke apart, unleashing a light barrier that tightly enveloped him. The defensive mechanism in the jade pendant was very strong. No matter how hard the cloud crashed and slammed, it could only produce a few ripples, and could not break through the light barrier. Finally, the power of the immortal talisman began to slowly dissipate. Wu Qi shook the completely dimmed immortal talisman, then slowly took a few steps back. Immortal Green Staff let out a wild laugh. He took 2 steps forward, pointed his finger at Immortal Kuhi, whose body was badly mutilated and his face was completely disfigured, and bellowed, "Kuhi, what else do you have to say today? Do you still have the face to live after being beaten to such a state by a disciple of Lao Tzu?" Immortal Kuhi howled viciously, "Green Wood, you've violated the decree of the immortal monarch and tried to kill me here. You're going to have to face the lawsuit." Immortal Green Staff, who was feeling extremely pleased when he saw his enemy severely wounded, was taken aback. He pointed at Immortal Kuhi and bellowed, "I tried to kill you." Standing aside, Wu Qi grinned coldly and said, "Sure enough, a shameless man is invincible. Old fogey Kuhi, it was you who attacked me first, and in the end, you were severely wounded by my ancestral master with just a single strike. You're really good at distorting the truth. TSK, so all the cultivation of your generation has been focused on your tongue? No wonder your divine abilities and dermic spells are just mediocre." Catfish Flood Dragon murmured under her breath, "All the cultivation is focused on the tongue. I bet this tongue is very chewy." Wu Qi's words made Immortal Kuhi jump and scream in anger. All of a sudden, an enormous immortal pressure came falling down from the sky. An old man clad in a purple immortal robe, his body glinting brilliantly, and a green jade medallion with 3 green lotus flowers hanging from his waist, slowly drifted down from the sky. Immortal Green Staff quickly put away his wooden staff, cupped his fist and bowed to the old man, "Greetings, Immortal Chuan." Immortal Kuhi had already cried out at the top of his voice, "Immortal Chuan, please help us. Yuanhua sect has violated your decree and killed us." Immortal Chuan cleared his throat and nodded his head lightly. Chapter 374. Immortal Chuan looked at Immortal Green Staff, who stood respectfully off to a side and did not say a word, then turned to look at Immortal Kuhi, whose face was swollen and body was covered in blood. He cleared his throat lightly, then pressed his right hand on his chest and said, "Fellow immortals, I believe you all know the rules and regulations of the Celestial Court. Outside the jurisdiction of the Celestial Court, you can fight to the death, and the Celestial Court will not be able to intervene." After a brief pause, Immortal Chuan tilted his head up, sighed and said, "But, in the jurisdiction of the Celestial Court, in this heavenly realm, anyone who dares to initiate a fight will be severely punished by the rules and regulations of the Celestial Court. If not, how will the Celestial Court keep its face? How will the dignity of all the Imperial Emperors be kept?" Pointing his finger at the sky, Immortal Chuan said in a deep voice with a solemn expression, "Not only the dignity and face of all the Imperial Emperors, but also the face of those Imperial Emperors." Immortal Green Staff said respectfully, "Immortal Monarch, please make a clear investigation. Yuanhua sect is not the one who initiated the fight. Meanwhile, immortal Kuhi stomped his feet and roared, "Could it be that I, a severely wounded man, initiated the fight? You have 2 heaven immortals." Immortal Chuan clasped his hands behind his back, frowning thoughtfully. He looked at Immortal Greenstaff, then at Immortal Kuhi, but did not say a word. A bright gleam flickered in his eyes, and no one could tell what was on his mind. Wu Qi narrowed his eyes and looked at Immortal Chuan. This man's expression were very familiar to him. In those years, when Lu Xiaobai offered bribes to the officials of various dynasties, they all had the same expression. Immortal Chuan remained silent for a full 15 minutes. Suddenly, Wu Qi walked out, bowed respectfully at Immortal Chuan and said, "Immortal Monarch, may I be so bold as to provide you with the evidence regarding this matter? Also, Immortal Monarch, please question the few immortal officials present here. They can testify that it was Immortal Kuhi from Huiling sect who first attacked the disciples of Yuanhua sect, forcing our masters to fight back." Covering his hands with his sleeves, Wu Qi handed over a storage bag to Immortal Chuan. The storage bag had a storage space the size of a room. There were several metal chests inside, all of which were densely packed with spirit stones of various colors. The number of spirit stones in these chests, if converted to low-grade spirit stones, was a whopping 2 million. Immortal Chuan gave Wu Qi a surprised look, then nodded at Immortal Greenstaff with a faint smile and said, "Fellow Immortal Greenstaff, if you have time in the future, do come to Puyo Heavenly Realm more often." Without batting an eyelid, Immortal Chuan rolled up his sleeve and took the storage bag from Wu Qi's hand. He nodded to Wu Qi with a smile and said, "This little guy is smart and quick-witted. He's a promising talent. What is going on today? Who was the one who attacked first? You must explain everything in detail." Immortal Chuan glared at the few nascent Divinity Realm immortal officials standing at the side. The few nascent divinity cultivators dared not to show any neglect. Without hesitation, they stepped forward and dropped to their knees, telling him everything that happened just now. However, after some embellishments, the words Wu Qi used to curse Immortal Kuhi had been changed into something insignificant. On the other hand, the few immortal officials emphasized on the fact that Immortal Kuhi had unleashed a sword beam to kill Wu Qi the moment they met. One of the nascent divinity cultivators with a handsome face said with a righteous tone, "Immortal Monarch, this Immortal Kuhi is a brutal man. He did not abide by the rules of the celestial court, and killed someone in public. This is a serious crime." Wu Qi bowed deeply to Immortal Chuan and said softly, "Immortal Monarch, you are a wise man. The truth is right here." Immortal Chuan gave Wu Qi an appreciative look, clasped his hands behind his back, and said with a cold grin, "Kuhi, what else do you have to say?" Before the dumbfounded Immortal Kuhi could say anything to defend himself, Immortal Chuan sneered and said, "Killing someone without teaching is a form of torture, and I can't do that. As for your punishment today, I'll let you know the reason behind it. Are you dissatisfied with me by killing someone in public in Puyo Heavenly Realm? Are you dissatisfied with the rules of the Celestial Court? Are you dissatisfied with the immortal monarchs? Or, are you dissatisfied with the immortal monarchs who made the rules of the Celestial Court?" Immortal Chuan's tone was extremely heavy. The few dissatisfactions he mentioned made Immortal Kuhi's face turn deathly pale. He staggered a few steps back, his body drenched in sweat, and dared not to defend himself. But, Immortal Chuan would never let him go. Suddenly, he pulled out a silver whip from his hand and gave it a powerful strike, knocking Immortal Kuhi to the ground. There was a thin layer of flame coiling around the silver whip. Wu Qi recognized the flame. It was the white yuan suppressing dark heavenly flame, which had an extremely high temperature from the 9 heavens. It was an upper-grade flame of pure yang, and could easily melt any lower-grade immortal item. Although it was an acquired flame, its power was incredible. A heavenly flame like this could only be controlled by a high-tier heaven immortal. Yet, Immortal Chuan's whip actually had a very powerful item like the white yuan suppressing dark heavenly flame on it. It was obvious that this immortal item was crafted by a high-tier heaven immortal and given to Immortal Chuan. According to Lady Dark Goldwater's memory, every immortal monarch who presided over a heavenly realm would be rewarded by the celestial court with a powerful immortal item, which served as their immortal treasure. Immortal Chuan's immortal item should be the reward he obtained from the celestial court. It was extremely difficult for an itinerant immortal to obtain an immortal item that he could use as he pleased. But, although these heaven immortals who joined the celestial court were bound by the rules of the celestial court, the benefits they received were very real. As soon as the whip lashed out, immortal Kuhi let out a miserable howl. Suddenly, a large sheet of white heavenly flame burst out from his body, causing his skin and flesh to sizzle and emit sizzling noises. Then, a dozen blood-colored crystal pearls shot out from his body. As the heavenly flame burned his body, it burned his blood essence and caused them to spray out, turning them into blood crystals and falling to the ground. Wu Qi counted and found that there were a total of 16 blood crystals on the ground. Each blood crystal was about the accumulation of 100 years cultivation base of a heaven immortal. With just one whip, Immortal Chuan had stripped away the energy essence and magic power that Immortal Kuhi had accumulated through 1,600 years of laborious cultivation. He was already severely wounded, and now, he was taught a heavy lesson by Immortal Chuan's whip, which had severely damaged his vitality. Even if all 16 blood crystals on the ground were returned to him, because of the loss caused by absorbing the blood crystals, he would probably lose 1,000 years cultivation base. With a cultivation base of 1,000 years, Immortal Kuhi was struggling and convulsing on the ground with a faint flame emanating from his body, crying and yelling, but no one knew what he was talking about. The disciples of Huiling sect standing behind him either covered their faces and dared not to look at him, or were staring at Wu Qi with hatred in their eyes, as if they were trying to remember his visage deep in their hearts. Wu Qi gave these disciples a cold smile, then turned to Immortal Chuan, cupped his fist and said, "Immortal Monarch, you are fair, strict, and impartial. Juniors have great admiration for you." Immortal Chuan pursed his lips into a faint smile and said coolly, "This is what I should do. As the immortal official who is in charge of Pulyuo Heavenly Realm, it is natural for me to uphold the justice of Pulyuo Heavenly Realm." Green Staff, I suppose you are the one who brought these disciples here to participate in the match? They are all good seedlings, and this little fellow is the best. What is his name? Wu Qi smiled and took a step back. Immortal Green Staff cupped his fist and said, "As you can see, Immortal Monarch, these disciples are the disciples that Green Staff's last disciple had taken in when he established his own sect. This little fellow's name is Wu Qi, and he is the smartest among all of them." Immortal Chuan kept nodding his head. Smilingly, he gave Wu Qi a look, then said, "Good, good, good. I have high hopes for this little fellow. In the future, he will surely be a pillar of support for Yuanhua sect. Green Staff, you may leave now if you have something to attend to. People of Huiling sect, you may leave now. If you dare to offend the rules of the Celestial Court again, don't blame me for being merciless." Waving his hand, Immortal Chuan signaled everyone to leave. As if they had just lost their parents, the people of Huiling sect carried the dying Immortal Kuhi in their arms and dashed into the teleportation formation, returning to the mountain gate of Huiling sect. Wu Qi and the others bowed respectfully at Immortal Chuan as well, then walked into another teleportation formation. The formation flickered with a blinding light, and the company was quickly teleported back to Yuanhua sect's headquarters, Green Cliff Planet. Immortal Green Staff gave Wu Qi a slap on the back of his head and said with a low voice, "Little boy, you do have some good eyesight. Immortal Chuan likes all kinds of energy stones and precious treasures the most. How many things did you give him in that storage bag just now?" Wu Qi told him the number of energy stones in the storage bag. After that, he smiled and said, "These are the things Master told me before I came here. He asked me to bring them with me at all times, so that I can use them when I am in urgent need. Considering how Immortal Chuan behaved just now, I think I can give it a try." Immortal Green Staff nodded happily, then turned to Patriarch Jiang Yun and said, "You do have the mood to do that. TSK, 2 million lower-grade energy stones, no wonder Immortal Kuhi was whipped. Now, it is not an injustice. Little fellow, you do have a good eyesight, and you can even lower yourself to bribe Immortal Chuan in front of him. This is not something I can do. After talking and laughing for a while, Immortal Green Staff brought the company out of the teleportation formation. The teleportation formation was located in a valley, surrounded by tall green mountains that looked like a screen. The circular valley measured about 100 miles in diameter. Apart from the tens of teleportation formations of various sizes, it was surrounded by countless exotic flowers and plants. At the foot of the mountains were palaces and pavilions of various colors, while streams were flowing. It was a very beautiful scenery. Upon seeing Immortal Green Staff walk out of the formation, all the executing disciples around the formation cupped their fists and bowed. Some addressed him as Uncle Master, some as Uncle Master, and many others as Uncle Master, Grand Uncle Master, and so on. Just from the way they addressed him, one could tell that there were quite a number of disciples in Yuanhua sect. It was a clear indication of their seniority. Immortal Green Staff nodded at those executing disciples smilingly, then led the company towards a tall building on the eastern side of the valley. After walking for over 20 miles, Immortal Green Staff explained to Wu Qi and the company that this place was the teleportation point that Yuanhua sect specialized in. Some of the palaces and pavilions nearby were the residences of the executing disciples of Yuanhua sect, while some were inns, shops, and even taverns and brothels. The place they were heading to was the Internal Affairs Palace of Yuanhua sect. Wu Qi and the company had to register their identities there and get a waist medallion before they could enter the hinterland of Yuanhua sect. Wu Qi and the company nodded and answered, then followed behind Immortal Green Staff. However, just as they arrived at the small square in front of the entrance of the Internal Affairs Palace, an old Taoist with a face as dark as ink, a long beard, clad in a black Taoist robe with coiling dragons on it, a tall jade crown on his head, and a long sword carried on his back, was seen walking out from the square, together with a group of over 100 people. When Immortal Green Staff and the old Taoist met face to face, his expression immediately changed. When the old Taoist saw Immortal Green Staff, he suddenly grinned coldly and said, "Green Staff, what are these idlers around you doing?" Immortal Green Staff cried out coldly, "Mo Wan, do you think you can control me?" A gray-haired old Taoist standing next to Taoist Mo Wan glared at him, then took a step forward and unleashed a powerful immortal pressure. Patriarch Jiang Yun sneered. Not to be outdone, he stepped forward and unleashed an immortal pressure that rolled out like a heavenly river. When both immortal pressures collided with each other, Chi-Chi gave a muffled snort as blood sprayed out from his 7 apertures. Surprisingly, Patriarch Jiang Yun and the gray-haired old Taoist had clashed head-on without holding back. Chapter 375. By K.R. Clenching his jaws, Patriarch Jiang Yun stared at the white-haired Taoist as a white sword beam shot out from the top of his head. The immortal pressures collided with each other, both combatants using their prime cultivation bases. Originally, Patriarch Jiang Yun was only one step away from the 35th tier Heaven Immortal realm. As he had obtained many benefits in Myriad Immortals planet, and was nourished by the immortal energy in Sang Ao Immortal Abode, more than half of his body had reached the 35th tier, and his cultivation base had improved significantly. But, the old Taoist he addressed as Baikar was a solid 36th tier Heaven Immortal. Therefore, when their immortal pressures collided, Baikar naturally suffered a great loss. Blood was oozing out of Patriarch Jiang Yun's 7 apertures, but not much. Only a few drops of blood were dripping down. But, Taoist White Sparrow was the unlucky one. His 7 apertures were like a faucet that was broken, with blood constantly dripping down. His eyes were blinking, his ears were ringing, and his immortal soul was shaken so badly that he nearly fainted on the ground. Taoist White Sparrow was severely wounded by the strike, while Patriarch Jiang Yun only suffered a slight shock. Unwilling to give up, he unleashed his sword beam and was about to attack Taoist White Sparrow with all his might. Taoist Mo Wan could not help but cry out angrily when he saw Patriarch Jiang Yun's mighty and aggressive attack. "Jiang Yun, how dare you attack someone here?" He pointed his finger out, and a beam of green light shot out. Daoist Mo Wan had also unleashed his sword beam and charged toward Patriarch Jiang Yun. The distance between them was less than 300 feet. Two sword beams of green and white colors quickly tangled with each other, like two great pythons in heat. It was as if two serpents in heat were twisting and wriggling in the air. 200s of feet long beams of sword light were clanging in the air, and the bright light was so bright that it made people's eyes hurt. Not long after that, a miserable wail rang out. Daoist Mo Wan let out a muffled snort and took tens of steps back hastily. His face turned deathly pale. Patriarch Jiang Yun snorted coldly and waved his hand toward the sword beam. A white immortal sword, less than 6 inches long, fell into his hand. There were specks of white gleams flashing on the surface of the sword beam, and the sword was leaping and flying like a living being. The flying sword was not damaged at all and was still shining brightly. The azure sword light fell heavily to the ground. It was a strange flying sword that was about 9 inches long and shaped like an azure bird. There were 2 azure sword wings on the blade, and it had an elegant and simple design. However, the blade of the flying sword was densely packed with sawtooth-like notches. It was obvious that the flying sword had been damaged and could not be used. Wu Qi lowered his head and sneered. There were 120 innate grand white spatial breaching pearls on Patriarch Jiang Yun's flying sword. Although it wasn't a fully formed treasure, its power was still extraordinary. With the support of the 120 pearls, the power of Patriarch Jiang Yun's immortal sword had greatly improved. At the very least, it had reached the standard of a high-grade immortal artifact. Although Daoist Mo Wan's flying sword was not bad, it was still a lower-grade immortal sword. How could it withstand the attack of the innate metal element energy at such a close distance? Patriarch Jiang Yun gave a long laugh as he opened his mouth and swallowed the flying sword. After that, he cupped his fist and said to Daoist Mo Wan, "Thank you for the guidance, Uncle Master." Immortal Green Staff laughed, nodded at Daoist Mo Wan, who had an unsightly expression, and said, "Senior brother, you have crossed the line by attacking a junior with your sword. Hee, not only did you attack me with your sword, you even lost to Jiang Yun. Perhaps you have taken in too many concubines recently, and have lost your energy?" Both Daoist Mo Wan and Immortal Green Staff were elders of Yuanhua sect, possessing the cultivation base of 32nd tier heaven immortals. However, both of them never got along well, and even their disciples often had conflicts with each other. However, due to the rules of Yuanhua sect, they dared not to have a real conflict. But today, his flying sword was destroyed by Patriarch Jiang Yun, a junior. Daoist Mo Wan's face turned unsightly, as if his entire family had just been killed. He was so angry that his body was trembling slightly. Upon hearing Immortal Green Staff's mocking words, Daoist Mo Wan's eyes turned bloodshot with anger. He gave Immortal Green Staff a fierce look and said coldly, "Good, very good." With a wave of his sleeve, Daoist Mo Wan grabbed Daoist White Sparrow, who was still in a coma, then transformed into a beam of green light and brought all the cultivators behind him as they sped away into the distance. Immortal Green Staff roared with laughter. While he was about to say something, Wu Qi had already sprung away from the scene. Grabbing the green bird-shaped flying sword that Daoist Mo Wan threw to the ground, Wu Qi shoved it into the black dragon's spirit ring, then turned to the dumbfounded Immortal Green Staff and said with a smile, "Even if this sword is broken, I can still recycle some of its materials. I'm very poor, so I'll take advantage of this broken flying sword." No matter it was the Earth Element Dragon Scale Shield or the Celestial Fiend Puppets, they could evolve by absorbing various materials. With this lower-grade immortal item, Wu Qi was confident that he could enhance the power of all the miscellaneous items he had. Even though what he did just now seemed like he was picking up some junk, he could not care less about that now. Shaking his head, Immortal Green Staff smiled and said, "Don't worry. Your Uncle Master Mo Wan is very generous. A mere flying sword is nothing to me." Grinning coldly, Immortal Green Staff raised his head to look at the sky and said in a low voice, "Jiang Yun, explain some things to these boys later. Don't let them be schemed against in our own sect, or else it will be too shameful." Patriarch Jiang Yun wiped off the blood on his face and answered respectfully. After that, he nodded at Wu Qi with a gratified expression. With some materials and effort, Daoist Mo Wan's green flying sword could be repaired. But now that it was snatched away by Wu Qi, no matter how thick-skinned Daoist Mo Wan was, he would never ask Wu Qi for it. Patriarch Jiang Yun was very pleased to be able to destroy an immortal item that belonged to Daoist Mo Wan. Immortal Green Staff held his head high and brought Wu Qi and company into the Internal Affairs Palace. His face was now glowing, and his spirit seemed to have improved greatly. A few young Taoists clad in white Taoist robes hurriedly came to greet them, bowing at Immortal Green Staff as he said, "Great Uncle Master, please forgive us for not welcoming you earlier. May I know what Great Uncle Master has brought us here?" Immortal Green Staff snorted coldly, glaring at these executing disciples and said, "What is Mo1 doing here just now?" One of the young Taoists answered hastily, "Great Uncle Master Mo1 has brought Uncle Master White Sparrow, who finished his apprenticeship 100,000 years ago, back to the sect. He also brought over 100 disciples of Uncle Master White Sparrow, saying that they are going to represent our sect in the match against Huiling sect." Immortal Green Staff sneered, then turned to look at Patriarch Jiang Yun and said, "Jiang Yun, it looks like our children have a competitor." Patriarch Jiang Yun smiled and said confidently, "I won't let them take away this opportunity." Patriarch Jiang Yun was very confident. "Do you think Taoist White Sparrow can find a priceless planet that was sealed off 2 eons ago? Do you think you can find so many excellent spirit pills and magical items to reward your disciples?" Myriad Immortals planet was the source of Patriarch Jiang Yun's confidence. Suddenly, Patriarch Jiang Yun's faint voice transmission rang out in Wu Qi's ears, "Remember this, my disciples. Mo1 is your ancestral master's enemy. White Sparrow is your master's sworn enemy. It was because of him that I left Yuanhua sect many years ago. Back then, I chopped off one of his arms with a single sword strike, and the enmity between us is very deep. You have to be very careful in everything you do. If you have any conflict with his disciples, show no mercy." Wu Qi nodded at Patriarch Jiang Yun, then turned to give Princess Xianglu a look. In the end, both Princess Xianglu and Catfish Flood Dragon did not take Patriarch Jiang Yun's words seriously. With great interest, Princess Xianglu glanced at the solemn interior of the Internal Affairs Palace, which was decorated in a very different style from the Imperial Palace of Great Yan Dynasty. As for Catfish Flood Dragon, she fixed her eyes on the few young Taoists in white robes, and saliva was seen coming out from the corner of her mouth. Led by the few young Taoists, Wu Qi and his company slowly came to a hall in the depths of the Internal Affairs Palace. Here, each of them registered their name and cultivation base, then received a few sets of the standard Taoist robes of Yuanhua sect, and a waist medallion made of white jade. The method of immortals was different from that of mortals. The few executing disciples of Internal Affairs Palace ran their palms across these waist medallions, and immediately, the names of Wu Qi and his company appeared on them, as well as their status in Yuanhua sect, Greenwood Peak, Outer Sect Disciple. On the other hand, the name medallion of Patriarch Jiang Yun was written on it, Greenwood Peak, Outer Sect Disciple, Jiang Yun. On the back of the medallion, there was an extra label written with striking golden characters, 36th Tier Heaven Immortal, Outer Sect Elder. After everything was done, the executing disciples of Internal Affairs Palace brought in 111 thumb-sized, dark jade slips. They were the most commonly used soul jade slips by the immortal sections. By sending a thread of divine will into the jade slips would ring loudly if the disciple was injured. If the disciple died, the jade slips would crack, and if the disciple's soul was destroyed, the jade slips would shatter into pieces. This was the ultimate method used by the immortal sects to keep track of the disciple's condition, so that they could send reinforcements or seek revenge in case of emergency. White Cloud Immortal Sect did not possess a strong overall strength, and was considered as an overlord in Liyuan Galaxy. Therefore, they did not prepare soul jade slips. On the other hand, Yuanhua Sect possessed a formidable overall strength, and they were located in Puyo Heavenly Realm, a place where immortal sects stood in great numbers and powerful experts emerged in large numbers. Therefore, they had to prepare soul jade slips properly. Otherwise, if a large number of their disciples were killed outside, and the sect did not receive any news about it, it would be a great threat to the foundation and legacy of an immortal sect. This was also the first time Wu Qi saw a soul jade slip. The crafting of this kind of jade slip required a rather rare material called earth core water abyss black jade. Apart from crafting soul jade slips, it was also an excellent material for crafting some strange magical treasures of the ghost Tao. In the scroll of stealing, it was listed as an 8th tier natural treasure. After sending a thread of divine will into the soul jade slip, the executing disciple of Internal Affairs Palace quickly carved Wu Qi's name and background on it. After that, someone would send the soul jade slip back to the sect, storing it in a special soul palace. When everything was done, Immortal Green Staff brought Wu Qi and the company out of the Internal Affairs Palace. He smiled and said, "Come, let's go to Greenwood Peak and have a rest first. Over the years, I've concocted several thousand vats of green bamboo wine, and a few of them have been stored for over 10,000 years. Today, I'll dig them out and have a good drink." 10,000 years old spirit wine. Wu Qi's eyes lit up. The wine concocted by immortal cultivators always had the magical effect of improving one's cultivation base and magical power. Needless to say, the effect of 10,000 years old spirit wine was no small matter. The company walked out of the Internal Affairs Palace excitedly. But, before they could soar into the sky, a beam of white light had already landed before them. A middle-aged man dressed like a scholar appeared before them with a gloomy face. Upon seeing them, he immediately scolded them. "Green Staff, are you the one who hurt your junior nephew White Sparrow for no reason? Bullying the weak? You're really something." Chapter 376. Yuanhua Sect on Green Cliff Planet in Puyo Heavenly Realm was founded by Patriarch Yuanhua 270 periods ago. After so many years of development, Yuanhua Sect had either uprooted or annexed the other few immortal sects on Green Cliff Planet, and eventually unified the entire planet. During the process, 5 out of the 7 personal disciples of Patriarch Yuanhua had fallen. Now, there were only 2 personal disciples with a cultivation base of 30th tier Heaven Immortal Realm, who served as the left and right legacy elders of Yuanhua Sect. One of them was the left legacy elder, Daoist Qi, who was also Immortal Green Staff's personal master. The other was the right legacy elder, Daoist Min, who was also Daoist Mo Wan's personal master, and a middle-aged scholar who came here in a rage to denounce Patriarch Yuanhua. Daoist Min pointed his finger at Immortal Green Staff's nose and snapped, "Green Staff, are you trying to overturn the heaven? Yuanhua Sect is now facing a formidable enemy, but instead of working together to fight the enemy, you have disregarded the bigger picture and attacked your fellow disciples, severely wounding them. What exactly are you trying to do?" His eyes went wide, and a faint blue gleam flashed from the depth of his eyes, while an enormous immortal pressure came crashing down. Immortal light flickered on both Immortal Green Staff and Patriarch Jiang Yun's bodies, transforming into a light barrier that shielded all their disciples behind them. The hazy light barrier trembled violently, and the floor tiles where it came into contact with the ground were shattered to pieces. Inch by inch, the light barrier sank into the ground. Both Immortal Green Staff and Patriarch Jiang Yun trembled as they took a few steps back. Wu Qi exercised the mystic eyes of universe and gave Daoist Min a glance. Strong waves of immortal energy could be sensed coming out from Daoist Min's chest, lower abdomen, and right thigh. Although it was covered by a long robe, Wu Qi could still sense that there were bull-sized penetrating wounds on his chest, lower abdomen, and right thigh, and they had not fully healed yet. It seemed that what Immortal Green Staff said was true, that all the Heaven Immortals of Yuanhua Sect were severely wounded at the same time. Just now, when Daoist Mo Wan was competing with Patriarch Jiang Yun with flying swords, Wu Qi already felt that Daoist Mo Wan did not have enough strength, and that was the reason why his flying sword was damaged by Patriarch Jiang Yun. As for Daoist Min, his injuries were even more severe. When the fleshly body of a heaven immortal was wounded, without sufficient spirit herbs to heal it, he could only rely on his own immortal energies to slowly heal himself. It would take him at least 10,000 years to fully recover. Despite being severely wounded, Daoist Min did not focus on healing himself in a secluded cultivation. Instead, he came out to find trouble with Immortal Greenstaff. Obviously, he hated Immortal Greenstaff to the core. Immortal Greenstaff's face turned livid. Clenching his jaws tightly, he resisted the pressure of Daoist Min's immortal pressure and said, "Uncle Master, how can you listen to a one-sided statement?" A blue gleam shot out of Daoist Min's eyes, stretching several feet away. Large sheets of clouds rushed out of his body like a flood, and in just a blink of an eye, the surrounding sky had turned blue. Everyone felt as if they were at the bottom of the ocean. Amidst the rippling blue light, large sheets of pale-colored clouds wheeled at top speed, while an enormous pressure kept pressing down from all directions. As Daoist Min let out a long, faintly discernible cry, a blue cloud dragon, about 100 feet long and as thick as a water tank, appeared out of nowhere, baring its fangs and brandishing its claws as it charged towards the crowd. The cloud dragon stretched its claws out and slapped heavily onto the energy barrier jointly unleashed by Immortal Greenstaff and Patriarch Jiang Yun. A loud boom rang out, and the energy barrier shattered. Immortal Greenstaff was forced back tens of steps in a sorry state, nearly knocking a few White Cloud Immortal Sect disciples to the ground. Meanwhile, Patriarch Jiang Yun cried out in pain. His face turned red as he sat down on the ground, unable to move for a long while. The tremendous impact of the cloud dragon shook the immortal energies in Patriarch Jiang Yun's body and nearly shattered all the meridians in his body. Relentlessly, the cloud dragon leaped down towards Wu Qi and the others, spreading its huge claw and slashing down forcefully. The huge claw of the cloud dragon covered an area of about 70 to 80 feet, enveloping Wu Qi, Princess Zhangluo, Catfish Flood Dragon, Lord Xiansheng, and a few other White Cloud Immortal Sect disciples. A strong water vapor came rushing at their faces, coiling around their bodies like ropes, trying to bind Wu Qi and the others. There were even tiny, razor-sharp water vapor that tried to squeeze into their bodies through their pores, causing them a severe pain on their skin, and causing faint bloodstains to come out from their pores. Shameless old fogey! Wu Qi cursed under his breath. Amidst an ear-splitting wolf howl, the sword of greedy wolf shot out like a dark beam. A barely audible buzzing noise echoed out in the void, while the surrounding earth energies rippled. A great amount of earth energies rushed out from the ground, transforming into magnetic force and shrouding the cloud dragon under Wu Qi's control. Following Wu Qi's will, he casually dragged the cloud dragon to the side. Daoist Min never dreamed that Wu Qi was actually an expert in the divine ability of geocentric magnetism. The magnetic force was condensed purely from earth energy, and since earth was the nemesis of water, it was a perfect counter to his cloud dragon condensed from water vapor. Caught unprepared, the enormous cloud dragon was dragged to the side by a tremendous magnetic force, slamming forcefully into the internal affairs palace behind Wu Qi and the others. A loud boom echoed out. The main entrance of the internal affairs palace, along with half of the hall, was crushed by the cloud dragon's claw. A few executing disciples who were standing at the entrance and staring blankly at the scene were also caught in the disaster. The cloud dragon's claw crushed all their bones into pieces, and the acquired water vapor squeezed into their bodies, tearing them apart like an electric drill sharpening a blade. The extreme pain made the few executing disciples scream shrilly, and they nearly burst into tears. Daoist Min's face suddenly turned purplish red. Flustered and exasperated, he leaped up and roared furiously, "Who is it? Who is it? Old Qi, are you the one who secretly attacked us?" Before his voice could fade away, Wu Qi's sword of greedy wolf had already pierced towards Daoist Min. Daoist Min roared furiously, slapped his sleeve, and was about to knock the sword away. He did not even look Wu Qi in the eye. He did not believe that it was Wu Qi, a puny nascent soul cultivator, who had used the magnetic force to pull his cloud dragon away. He was a 30th tier heaven immortal. How could he be fooled by a nascent soul cultivator who was weaker than an ant? A loud clang rang out. The sword of greedy wolf was knocked flying far away by Taoist Min's sleeve, and the sword beam did not even break a thread on his sleeve. Wu Qi's heart sank. Sure enough, there was a huge gap between his cultivation base and that of a heaven immortal, and the grade of the sword of greedy wolf was still too low. An enormous pressure came pouring down from all directions, as 18 cloud dragons leaped towards Wu Qi and his company in a row. This time, Taoist Min had all his attention focused on these 18 cloud dragons. The power of each cloud dragon was at least 100 times stronger than the one Wu Qi pulled away just now. Clenching his teeth, Wu Qi exercised the magnetic force, trying to divert the momentum of these cloud dragons. But, it was like a mantis trying to stop a chariot. How could he defeat Taoist Min when he became serious? Taoist Min, who had turned serious, finally noticed Wu Qi as well, and realized that the magnetic force that kept gushing out from his body was actually coming out from Wu Qi. Laughing fiercely, Taoist Min said, "So, it is really you? How dare you disrespect and rebel against your master? How dare you attack an elder of our sect? A disobedient disciple like you must be severely punished. You must be severely punished." Blue immortal energies rushed out from his body, while the 18 cloud dragons suddenly expanded to 100 times their original size. The enormous pressure made Princess Xianglu, Catfish Flood Dragon, Lord Xiansheng, and all the other disciples of White Cloud Immortal Sect lose their balance, and were forced to kneel down on the ground. When facing the immortal pressure unleashed with full force by a 30th tier heaven immortal, apart from kneeling down, there was nothing else they could do. Wu Qi turned around and gave them a glance. Princess Xianglu, Lord Xiansheng, and Catfish Flood Dragon were trembling, trying to stand up, but no matter how hard they tried, they just could not. Princess Xiangli's pretty face turned red, and she stared at Taoist Min with her eyes wide open in humiliation. Wu Qi felt as if he was being pressed down by a great mountain as well. His knees were hurting, and he was forced to kneel down slowly. He was powerless to resist, and he could not even control his own life and death. The humiliated expression on Princess Xiangli's face made Wu Qi suddenly recall the time a long, long time ago, when he, Wu Wang, and Lu Xiaobai were trapped in a secret cave in the belly of a mountain, and their life and death were controlled by someone. It was a desperate situation where they had no control over their own life and death. This scene was so similar to the scene at that time. He could not accept this. His woman, Princess Xianglu, was actually forced to kneel down before this old fool. Why? Kneel to the heaven, kneel to the earth, kneel to our ancestors, kneel to our masters, and kneel to our seniors. But, why should I, Wu Qi, and all the people around me, kneel before an immortal like Taoist Min? Is it because you are strong enough? Is it because you are strong enough? The black dragon's spirit ring shook, and a great amount of blood and soul crystals were spat out from it, fusing directly into Wu Qi's fingertips. Through the meridians on his fingertips, they flowed to the 7 stealing heaven meridians in Wu Qi's arms. Then, 10 Jin Dan shone with a blinding light, as the enormous blood essence of a heaven immortal rushed into them in an instant, causing Wu Qi's 10 Jin Dan to expand to their current limit. 7 Foundation, 3 spiritual and 7 physical souls, split. As Wu Qi recited the incantation in a low voice, Wu Qi's complete 3 spiritual and 7 physical souls suddenly split apart, transforming into 10 bright beams that rushed into 10 Jin Dan. All of a sudden, the 10 Jin Dan were filled with sentience, as the 3 spiritual and 7 physical souls fused into the Jin Dan. Vaguely, the spirit embryo of Jin Dan, who sat cross-legged and looked exactly the same as Wu Qi, could be seen sitting cross-legged inside the Jin Dan. Chapter 377. Before Immortal Green Staff and Patriarch Jiang Yun could say anything, Wu Qi had already howled at the top of his lungs, "Great Ancestral Master, please uphold justice for us. We have traveled tens of thousands of miles to Green Cliff Planet to serve our master, and yet, we are treated like this. It has really disappointed many of us outer sect disciples." Taoist White Sparrow provoked us with his immortal pressure, Ancestral Master Mo Wan killed us with a sword beam, and Grand Ancestral Master Kuang shielded his disciple. Is this how we are going to be repaid for our sincerity? Taoist Min threw his head back and let out a furious roar. Abruptly, his body transformed into a cloud and shot up into the sky, disappearing without a trace in just a blink of an eye. Taoist Chi kept laughing and saying, "That's reasonable, that's reasonable. Come, quickly follow me to meet the Ancestral Master." He strode up to Lord Xiansheng, took a few turns, and said with a frown, "You look like a human, and there is nothing unsightly about you. You can use some spirit talismans that can conceal your aura to fool us. Who would know who you are?" From the bottom of his left ear to the left corner of his mouth, there was a black line that looked very glaring to the eyes. It kept swelling, and gradually turned pinkish golden and translucent, filled with pale golden blood. Taoist Min was severely beaten by the bamboo stick, and it was hard to tell if he was dead or alive. He covered his face with both hands and grunted for a long time, before finally clenching his jaws and climbing to his feet. A Taoist, who stood over 10 feet tall, with the waist of a bear and the back of a tiger, and a rugged face that gave him an air of dementia, was striding toward them with a wicker basket in his hand and a verdant bamboo stick in his hand. He gave Taoist Min a look, then said in a low, muffled voice, "Junior brother, since you bullied my disciple, I'll teach you a lesson. If you dare to strike again, I'll turn against you. Master is in a secluded cultivation, and no one will care even if I kill you." After that, Taoist Chi turned to look at Catfish Flood Dragon, who had a big catfish head on her head. Frowning, he came next to Catfish Flood Dragon, giving her a measuring look with a wry smile. Shaking his head helplessly, he said, "Jiang Yun, tell me, why did you choose a big dark fish as your disciple?" "Well, I'm sure you know the difference between humans and demons. You can't use the identity of a demon cultivator." Immediately, the impression the people from White Cloud Immortal sect had towards Taoist Min became even worse. How did he manage to gain a foothold in Yunhua sect with such an immoral teacher? Taoist Chi snorted coldly, then he murmured, "According to this logic, I'm older than you, and my cultivation base is stronger than you. If I take a fancy to one of your female disciples, and force her to be betrothed to my disciples and grand disciples, wouldn't you have to agree to it?" Well, it was not right to say that he was gnashing his teeth. Half of his teeth were loosened, and once he did so, the piercing pain almost made him howl out loud. He could only grimace and exhale heavily as he shouted in an extremely embarrassed manner, "Old Chi, you attacked me?" Taoist Chi stared blankly at Taoist Min and said, "Inappropriate. What's wrong with that? Tell me, what's wrong with that?" Wu Chi cupped his fist and bowed to Taoist Chi, then laughed and said, "Great Ancestral Master, the fact that my master was able to take a Dragon King of a water domain, who was conferred by the Celestial Court, as his outer sect disciple, proves that Yuanhua sect's reputation has spread far and wide. Therefore, all the immortals from all walks of life have come to join us. This is a very auspicious sign." It was a verdant bamboo branch, about 10 feet long, with a total of 36 sections. A thin green golden talisman was attached to each section. The thickest part of the bamboo branch was as thick as a thumb, and the thinnest part was as thin as a green bean. When activated by the talisman, its weight was no less than that of a lofty mountain. Taoist Min, who did not put up his guard, immediately suffered a great loss when he was slapped in the face by such a bamboo branch. Wu Chi narrowed his eyes and kept grinning evilly. Suddenly, he recalled that their ancestor was indeed Wanying Dragon King, a Dragon King who was officially conferred the title of Dragon King. Although his status was equal to the leader of a production team, and in the civil service system of the Celestial Court, he was just a sesame-sized Dragon King who was conferred the title of Dragon King. Their ancestor was actually conferred by the Celestial Court, and was ordered to manage the water system of Longyuan River. Taoist Min sneered. Suddenly, he pointed at Lord Xiansheng and Catfish Flood Dragon and said, "I have no idea what Jiang Yun has done over the years, but as a disciple of Yuanhua sect, I can't believe that he has colluded with demon cultivators, and that there are demon cultivators among his disciples. This is a great disgrace to Yuanhua sect. With such conduct, how could he represent Yuanhua sect in the match against Huiling sect? Demon cultivators, Yuanhua sect actually has a demon disciple. Isn't this just letting all the fellow immortals in Puyo heavenly realm digest this? Hold on. Daoist Min, who was pushed into a corner by Daoist Qi, cried out sternly, "Senior brother, this is not appropriate." Daoist Min sneered complacently and said, "Green Staff, you are really muddle-headed. If your disciple has taken a demon cultivator as his disciple, doesn't that mean Yuanhua sect is also a monster? This will be a great blow to the prestige of Yuanhua sect. If Huiling sect learns about this, how can we still have the face to compete with them?" Daoist Min was struck dumb by Wu Qi's counterattack. With a trembling body, he stared at Wu Qi and snapped, "How presumptuous! How did I disobey the decree of the Celestial Court?" The Celestial Court was the governmental organization that ruled over Panga continent and many heavenly realms in the universe. It had a great prestige, as well as a very powerful force. It was not something that could be easily shouldered by anyone who disobeyed the decree of the Celestial Court. Daoist Qi's face was gloomy, and he did not say a word. Immortal Green Staff said cautiously, "Master, both of them are Jiang Yun's outer sect disciples." She was knocked flying far away by a bamboo stick, and her hammer missed its target. She was about to continue attacking Daoist Min, but was dragged back by Lord Xiansheng. Before Daoist Qi could say anything, Daoist Min immediately cried out, "Listen! Listen! The people from Huiling sect have seen this. How can we ignore something that is damaging to the reputation of Yuanhua sect? Quickly cripple Jiang Yun and the others' cultivation base and drive them out of Green Cliff Planet." Grinning coldly, Wu Qi turned to Lord Xiansheng and said, "Elder brother, your ancestor is from the bloodline of the Dragon King, who was conferred the decree of the Celestial Court." Wu Qi let out 2 loud howls, and tears immediately sprayed out from his eyes. He had learned Lady Dark Goldwater's Dark Een Water scripture, which allowed him to freely control the water vapor around him. Therefore, he could freely control the water content in his body. With a thought in his mind, tears immediately burst out from his eyes, and Wu Qi looked as if he had suffered a great grievance. Lord Xiansheng suddenly came to his senses. He fished and rummaged in his storage ring for a while, then fished out a large seal that shone with a bright blue gleam. The seal was engraved with a pattern of fishes and shrimps playing in the water, and a vague image of a dragon was seen rolling and rocking in the water. At the bottom of the seal were 8 ancient seal characters, conferred the Lord of Longyuan River by the Celestial Court. It was the certificate of Dragon King of Longyuan River that Lord Xiansheng used as a toy when he was young, and he had kept it with him all the time. For generations, the clan of heavenly dragons had maintained a good relationship with the Celestial Court, and all the water systems under the heaven were under the jurisdiction of the descendants of heavenly dragons. Any Dragon King of the Flood Dragon lineage with the title of Dragon King would have been conferred by the heavenly courts. Who said that the Dragon King conferred by the Celestial Court is an evildoer? Wu Qi said softly. How dare you?" Wu Qi's eyes lit up. So, this man was Daoist Qi. Immortal Green Staff's master. He really liked this temperament. It looked like this Daoist Qi was born with a one-track mind, and Wu Qi really liked this kind of person. Daoist Qi was struck dumb. He stared blankly for a while, then turned to look at Lord Xiansheng. Wu Qi's eyes lit up. No wonder Immortal Green Staff and Daoist Min's clan did not get along with each other, as if they were mortal enemies. So, this is the reason. Immortal Green Staff is an amazing man. He actually managed to snatch Daoist Min's dual cultivation partner. This is a brutal slap on Daoist Min's face. With this, he will never be able to raise his head again for the rest of his life. Daoist Min was struck dumb, and Daoist Qi was also struck dumb. Suddenly, he burst out laughing. Daoist Min touched the gash on his face and said in a ferocious voice, "Old Qi, just pretend that what happened just now never happened. But, since your disciple is recruiting a demon cultivator as his disciple, obviously, he is already a top genius. Severe punishment, he must be severely punished. Jiang Yun and all the disciples he brought here will have their cultivation base crippled, and they will be driven out of Green Cliff Planet. If you don't do it now, don't blame me for complaining to my master. Taoist Chi murmured under his breath, even outer sect disciples can't do it. Demon cultivators. They are demon cultivators who can't even transform into human forms. Only existences at the realm of gold immortal or above could have the qualification to resist the decree of the celestial court occasionally. How could an immortal sect like Yunhua sect have the courage to resist the celestial court? All the disciples of White Cloud Immortal sect were staring blankly at Immortal Green Staff as well, marveling in their minds that this ancestral master of theirs was indeed an amazing man. He actually managed to snatch the girl that their uncle master had taken a fancy to. Taoist Min was a wicked man who took advantage of his position to bully others and abduct innocent girls, while Immortal Green Staff was naturally a hero who saved the people when they were in danger. Noticing that Taoist Min refused to let go of this topic, Wu Qi frowned and said in a cold voice, "Senior Min, you keep saying that my two brothers and sisters are demon cultivators. How audacious of you! How dare you disobey the decree of the celestial court? How dare you?" Taoist Qi shook his head as if nothing had happened and said, "You are not my match in a fight. According to the sect rules set by my master, if any disciple dares to hurt a fellow disciple, his or her cultivation base will be crippled and he or she will be expelled from the sect. Junior brother, you see, these disciples of Internal Affairs Palace did not offend you. Why did you hurt them for no reason? Don't tell me it was not your Ocean Dragon Cloudy Sky spell that injured them." Wu Qi breathed out a sigh of relief. Now, he had one more enemy. Taoist Qi's eyes went wide as he stared at Taoist Min, whose face had turned livid. He sneered and said, "Junior brother, how dare you bully my disciples? Isn't it just because Green Staff snatched the partner you fancied years ago? Green Staff and Green Grasshopper are in love with each other, and they are willing to become partners. What are you trying to do by meddling in their relationship? You are older, and your cultivation base is higher. Do you think that anyone you fancied must marry you? That is unreasonable." Waving his hand, Taoist Qi pointed at the few executing disciples of Internal Affairs Palace, who had their bones broken by Cloud Dragon and said, "Why are you guys still in a daze? Should we send them to Pill Healing Palace for treatment? Are we going to watch them die in vain? Green Staff, and, it's you, Jiang Yun. Don't just stand there in a daze. Follow me to pay a visit to the Ancestral Master. He is worrying about the match with Huiling Sect." Immortal Green Staff murmured in a low voice, "I already know. We bumped into people from Huiling Sect on the way." As the most painful scar of his life was abruptly torn open in front of so many juniors, Taoist Min was so angry that he jumped up and down violently, his long hair standing straight up. "Old Qi, are you trying to fight me to the death?" he roared with a stern voice. Chapter 378. Green Cliff Planet was famous for its Green Cliff Mountain. The headquarters of Yuanhua sect was built amidst the lofty mountains and lofty ridges that stretched over 10,000 miles around Green Cliff Mountain. Countless peaks were like a host of stars surrounding the moon, surrounding and protecting the Green Cliff Mountain that was 50 kilometers tall and over 10 kilometers wide. It was oddly shaped like a sword, and it was completely translucent and dark green in color, and was formed from a pool of green jade. Immortal cultivators were experienced and knowledgeable, and they had seen all kinds of marvelous sights. But, they had never seen or heard of a mountain like Green Cliff Mountain, which was entirely made up of green jade. There was a rumor among the immortal cultivators of Puyo Heavenly Realm and the few surrounding heavenly realms that the Green Cliff Mountain was originally the sword of an ancient almighty being. When he died, the sword fell into the Green Cliff Star, and that was how this marvelous scene was created. No matter what people said, it was an undeniable fact that Green Cliff Mountain was a majestic mountain with a beautiful scenery. The cave abode of Patriarch Yuanhua, the founding patriarch of Yuanhua sect, was located right in the middle of Green Cliff Mountain. Halfway up the mountain, there was a platform about 1 acre in circumference, with a crescent-shaped arch at the end. A few young boys were seen standing in front of the arch with their hands hanging down. Together with the purple Ganoderma immortal herbs, white cranes, black deer, and many other plants in the vicinity, it gave off a very immortal atmosphere. Inside the cave abode was a small cave abode that measured nearly 1,000 miles in circumference. It was a small cave abode created by Patriarch Yuanhua using his own immortal energy. Several hundred energy veins were gathered under the cave abode, transforming the natural energies into immortal energy through an excellent quality energy condensing and immortal ascension ball. As a result, this small cave abode was filled with immortal energy, only slightly weaker than Sung Ao immortal abode. It was in this small cave abode named Green Cliff Immortal Abode that Wu Qi met Patriarch Yuanhua for the first time in front of an exquisite wooden hut. It was surrounded by towering cypress trees, giving off a quiet and ethereal atmosphere. Apart from a few birds squatting on the branches, and Patriarch Yuanhua sitting on a hassock in front of the wooden house, there were no other living beings in this place. Daoist Qi strode to the front of the wooden house and roared, "Master, that Jiang Yun, who was forced to leave the sect because he used a sword to injure a fellow disciple, is back. He brought 110 disciples with him, and each of them is an expert. TSK, just now, Junior Marshall brother was trying to find trouble with them and was chased away by this disciple with a bamboo stick." Patriarch Yuanhua was thin as a pine tree, but the right half of his upper body was gone, and was now wrapped in a white veil. Slowly, he opened his eyes, and a faint stream of purple-green immortal energy sprayed out of his nostrils. He nodded slowly and said in a low voice, "It's Jiang Yun. Back then, you took the blame for Green Staff. But no matter what, you have to be punished for injuring a fellow disciple." Clearing his throat, Patriarch Yuanhua said slowly, "As for this, if your disciple can win the match against Huiling sect, I'll let you return to our sect with this credit. Don't be an outer sect disciple. With your current cultivation, you're qualified to be an inner sect elder." Patriarch Jiang Yun dropped to his knees and gave Patriarch Yuanhua a few kowtows reverently, then answered in a low voice, "Yes." After Immortal Green Staff brought Wu Qi and the others to greet Patriarch Yuanhua, Daoist Qi plopped himself down next to Patriarch Yuanhua and shouted, "But, Master, Junior Marshall Brothers' disciple has also brought a group of disciples with him. Are you really going to let Jiang Yun's disciples participate in the match?" Patriarch Yuanhua nodded and said with a smile, "Just now, Mo Wan brought his disciples to greet me as well. But White Sparrow's disciples are far weaker than Jiang Yun's disciples. As I'm the leader of Yunhua sect, naturally, I have to do everything for the sake of the sect. I'll let whoever has a higher chance of winning go." Patriarch Yuanhua coughed lightly, and some golden blood trickled down from the corner of his mouth. Helplessly, he pointed at the missing half of his body and said with a bitter smile, "I've embarrassed myself in front of you, my children. Reverend Huilin, the founding ancestral master of Huiling sect, has a cultivation base similar to mine. That day, we fought each other with all our might, and as a result, both of us were severely wounded." Wu Qi twitched his lips. The injury was indeed a miserable one. For heaven immortals, especially those middle and high-tier heaven immortals, their immortal bodies were the result of hundreds of thousands, millions, or even tens of millions of years of hard work. Ordinary immortal spells could hardly seriously injure them, but once they were wounded, the source of immortal energy would be severely damaged, and the injury would be extremely difficult to heal. For the injury Patriarch Yuanhua was suffering right now, without 2 periods of dedicated cultivation, or without the help of immortal pills of excellent quality, it would be extremely difficult for him to recover. Wu Qi, who happened to be standing behind Patriarch Jiang Yun, poked Patriarch Jiang Yun with his finger and transmitted his voice to him, "Spirit pills, immortal pills." Patriarch Jiang Yun was taken aback, and then he suddenly came to his senses. He quickly took 2 steps forward and dropped to his knees once again. "Ancestral Master, over the years, I was lucky enough to find some decent spirit herbs, and a few ancient pill formulas. I've just concocted a cauldron of 7th grade immortal pills, the Calamity Recovery Pill. It's a pity that I only managed to concoct 2 pills. I wonder if they can be of any help to you, Ancestral Master. Carefully, he fished out a flat jade box from under his sleeve, held it over his head, and presented it to Patriarch Yuan Hua. A 7th grade immortal pill. Patriarch Yuan Hua was struck dumb with astonishment. He gave Patriarch Jiang Yun a look, then turned to look at Wu Qi. Nodding, he said with a smile, if it is really a 7th grade immortal pill, I might be able to fully recover from my injury in a few months. A 7th grade immortal pill is an excellent pill that even first-tier heaven immortals treasure. Who would have thought? After a brief moment of pondering, Patriarch Yuan Hua grabbed the jade box with his left hand and opened its lid with a shake of his wrist. Inside were 2 immortal pills, each the size of a longan, with countless green mists and golden gleams swirling rapidly inside. They looked like 2 glass pearls. Right after the lid was opened, the 2 immortal pills immediately produced a light swooshing sound, as the surrounding immortal energies kept being sucked into them like streams of water. They are indeed 7th grade spirit pills of the upper grade. Birth Calamity Restoration Pill. I've never heard of this name before. Patriarch Yuan Hua frowned and said in a deep voice, Jiang Yuner, can I have a look at the pill formulas? Patriarch Jiang Yun nodded hastily, then took out all the ancient pill formulas Wu Qi gave him in Sung Ao Immortal Abode and presented them to Patriarch Yuan Hua. Patriarch Yuan Hua was struck dumb, then he shook his head and said to Daoist Qi with a smile, Jiang Yuner, you are a simple and kind person, just as you used to be. Patriarch Yuan Hua took over the pill formulas and gave them a brief glance. Then, he was taken aback and cried out in surprise, they are indeed marvelous. The technique of concocting herbs, the technique of controlling fire, and the various hand incantations are completely different from the technique of alchemy nowadays. They are indeed thought-provoking and marvelous. Patriarch Yuan Hua breathed out a long sigh and returned the pill formulas to Patriarch Jiang Yun. After a brief moment of silence, he smiled and said, Green Staff, you can officially accept Jiang Yun into the sect. These few pill formulas are more than enough to make Yuan Hua sect dominate the entire Puyo heavenly realm. Patriarch Jiang Yun was struck with wild joy. He kept kowtowing and thanking Patriarch Yuan Hua. Patriarch Yuan Hua smiled as he helped Patriarch Jiang Yun to his feet with one hand. After that, he gave Wu Qi a deep look and said, You are Wu Qi, right? Very good, very good. After a brief moment of pondering, Patriarch Yuan Hua waved his left hand. Soundlessly, a pale blue flying sword, as thin as a willow leaf and measuring only 7.2 inches long, flew before Wu Qi. Patriarch Yuan Hua smiled and said, This is a flying sword I found by accident. Its name is Xuanhao. Take it and protect yourself. The Xuanhao sword was an upper-grade spirit item, and it contained a very strong sentience. It kept twisting and turning in the air like a swimming fish. Wu Qi gladly kowtowed to Patriarch Yuan Hua and thanked him, then took over the Xuanhao sword. Patriarch Yuan Hua nodded and smiled, then flicked his sleeve. Beams of bright light shot out, transforming into a flying sword and a set of defensive outfits hovering before each of the 110 White Cloud Immortal Sect disciples brought here by Patriarch Jiang Yun. Patriarch Yuan Hua said in a deep voice, Since we are going to have the match with Huiling Sect, the defensive treasures must not be too shabby. All the flying swords are mid-grade spirit items, and all the defensive outfits are lower-grade spirit items. Work hard on them. The match will be held in 1 year and 6 months. One after another, Wu Qi and the others bowed and thanked Patriarch Yuan Hua for the generous gift. Patriarch Yuan Hua smiled pleasantly. He shoved the jade box containing the 2 spirit pills into a secret pocket in front of his chest, then turned to Lord Xiansheng and Catfish Flood Dragon and said, Both of you, come out here and let me have a good look at you. Little boy, are you the Dragon King conferred by the Celestial Court? Lord Xiansheng and Catfish Flood Dragon walked out, then dropped to their knees and bowed to Patriarch Yuan Hua. After that, Lord Xiansheng rose to his feet and said respectfully, "My father is the lord of Longyuan River, which stretches for nearly 100 million miles, and can be considered as one of the major rivers. As for me, I have received an official document from my father, and am now the lord of a certain ocean." Lord Xiansheng fished out the seal that originally belonged to Wanying Dragon King and handed it over to Patriarch Yuanhua respectfully. Patriarch Yuanhua took the seal and gave it a glance, then smiled pleasantly and said, "You are indeed a legitimate Dragon King conferred by the Celestial Court. Also, judging from the rules of this seal, your clan can be considered as a legitimate dragon with a long history." After returning the seal to Lord Xiansheng, Patriarch Yuanhua said, "It is a great news that a Dragon King conferred by the Celestial Court has become my disciple. Jiang Yun, you are indeed an excellent disciple of Yuanhua sect." Patriarch Jiang Yun nodded with a smile, not saying a word. Patriarch Yuanhua turned to look at Catfish Flood Dragon curiously. When he saw the big fish head on her head, he smiled wryly and said, "Don't tell me you can't transform into a human? Your dragon energy and magic power are quite strong. Well, you are a member of the Dragon King's bloodline, and you can be considered as a subordinate of the Celestial Court, even if..." When he said that, Patriarch Yuanhua shut his mouth. Wu Qi could guess what he wanted to say. After all, Catfish Flood Dragon was a subordinate of the Celestial Court. Even if she had an ugly appearance, she was still a subordinate of the Celestial Court. Who would dare to say a word of nonsense? Patriarch Yuanhua chose a few other disciples from White Cloud Immortal sect and exchanged a few words with them. Patriarch Yuanhua's words and actions were like a spring breeze caressing one's face, bringing warmth to one's heart. All the disciples of White Cloud Immortal sect were very excited, and they could not wait to kill all the disciples chosen by Huiling sect. Just as everyone was laughing and talking harmoniously, a few streaks of cloud light suddenly approached them at high speed. Daoist Min, who had nearly recovered from the injury on his face, rushed over with a gloomy face. He told Patriarch Yuanhua in a deep voice, "Master, Reverend Huilin is here." He said that Martial Nephew Greenstaff ignored Immortal Monarch's mediation, and set up an ambush along the way, wounding that mongrel Kuhi. Patriarch Yuanhua's face darkened instantly. Grinning coldly, he said, "How dare he bully us? My boys, follow me out, and prepare to kill." Patriarch Yuanhua, who looked like an old grandpa next door a moment ago, suddenly turned into a furious butcher, emanating an astonishing killing intent. Chapter 379. Hovering above Green Cliff Mountain, an old Taoist with one arm and one leg was seen hovering in midair, his face filled with a murderous aura. Missing an arm, this old Taoist priest's left arm and shoulder were chopped off. Missing a leg, this old Taoist priest's right thigh was blown away by the heavenly thunder, and only a small part of the leg bone barely connected his calf to his body. There was also a thin, flat hole in his chest. Obviously, it was caused by a flying sword. The injury was more serious than Patriarch Yuanhua's. Without a few periods of arduous cultivation, or the use of powerful immortal pills, it would take a long time for him to fully recover. However, the life force of immortals was extremely strong, and the higher the level of an immortal, the stronger their life force would be. According to the legends, as long as the immortal soul of a first-tier heaven immortal did not dissipate, he would be able to live a good life, even if he only had a head left. That was why this old Taoist could still hover arrogantly on Green Cliff Mountain, provoking Yuanhua sect with a stern voice even though he was severely injured. "Yuanhua, you old fogey! How could you ignore Immortal Chuan's mediation and send your disciples to ambush my disciples? You've gone too far." The old Taoist, Reverend Huilin, the founding ancestral master of Huiling sect, pointed his finger at Green Cliff Mountain and shouted, "Show yourself! Show yourself now! Today, you and I will fight to the death." Following closely behind Patriarch Yuanhua, Wu Qi stepped on a sword beam and shot into the sky. Reverend Huilin was the only disciple from Huiling sect, while on the side of Yuanhua sect, a dozen heaven immortals and over 100 nascent divinity cultivators had already deployed a killing formation with the 6 directions of the southern divinity 6 stars embedded within, trapping Reverend Huilin within. The eye of the formation was Green Cliff Mountain, where 3 heaven immortal elders of Yuanhua sect were sitting cross-legged, guarding 6 pale red flying swords that were wheeling in the sky. Reverend Huilin was trapped by the formation, and Patriarch Yuanhua had arrived before him. But he showed no fear, just proudly clasped his hands behind his back and looked up into the sky. Patriarch Yuanhua could not help but give a cold snort when he saw how calm and composed he looked. "Old fogey Huilin, why are you provoking Yuanhua sect for no reason?" Reverend Huilin glared at Patriarch Yuanhua and said furiously, "You think I'm stirring up trouble for no reason? Your disciple, Green Staff, injured my disciple, Yan He. You have to give me an explanation." Patriarch Yuanhua rolled his eyes. Without wasting any time, he casually waved his hand into the sky. Immediately, all the clouds within 10,000 miles of him began to rustle and quickly gather towards his palm. In just a blink of an eye, a white thunderball the size of a rice bucket appeared in Patriarch Yuanhua's palm. Without uttering a single word, he threw the thunderball towards Reverend Huilin. Reverend Huilin let out a cold snort as well. His eyes widened, and suddenly, a clear spring appeared in front of him. A lotus quickly sprouted from the spring, and in the blink of an eye, it had become luxuriant with branches and leaves. 3 tender and delicate lotus flowers slowly sprouted from it. The 3 lotus flowers, each about 10 feet in circumference, trembled lightly, and firmly blocked the incoming thunderball. With a muffled sound, the surrounding air trembled. The ball of lightning and the lotus were destroyed at the same time. 2 sword cries rang out, as a white sword beam shot out from the top of Patriarch Yuanhua's head, thrusting towards Reverend Huilin's chest. Similarly, a yellow sword beam flew out from behind Reverend Huilin's back, transforming into a cold beam that looked like a great python with scales and claws, thrusting towards Patriarch Yuanhua's flying sword. 2 sword beams collided like 2 mad bulls. They twisted, tangled, stabbed, and scratched each other, and fought fiercely in the air. The jarring noises of friction shook the ears of Wu Qi and the others who were watching the battle from afar, causing them to feel a sharp pain in their ears, forcing them to seal their eardrums. The stalemate lasted for a full 2 hours. Finally, Patriarch Yuanhua's mastery of the sword-controlling technique became a notch higher, as he unleashed a thin sword beam diagonally, thrusting towards Reverend Huilin like a lightning bolt. On the other hand, the yellow sword beam unleashed by Reverend Huilin had its glow dimmed, losing its initial power. Seeing that the sword beam was about to pierce through Reverend Huilin's body, Reverend Huilin gave a cold snort, performed an incantation gesture with both hands, and cried out indifferently, "Order! Retreat!" The air in front of him trembled, and a thunderclap rang out. The sword beam was shattered to pieces, turning into countless fireflies in the air. Clang! A loud ringing rang out as Reverend Huilin shattered Patriarch Yuanhua's sword beam. But at the same time, his flying sword had lost all its flame after being twisted by Patriarch Yuanhua's white sword beam, transforming into a dark yellow flying sword with a strange shape as it staggered backward in a sorry state. A dim airflow rushed out from the top of Reverend Huilin's head, catching his flying sword and hiding it inside his body. Meanwhile, Patriarch Yuanhua pointed his finger out, causing the flying sword to shine with a blinding light, then a 1,000 feet long white beam shot towards Reverend Huilin. Reverend Huilin snorted coldly, then put his hand into his mouth and bit his fingertip. Using his pale golden immortal blood, he drew a fist-sized rune in the air. Wu Qi recognized the rune. It was none other than the word, "Awe," found in the ancient immortal script, and it possessed an extremely powerful force. As a sonorous incantation rang out, Reverend Huilin shook his wrist, shooting out the golden rune. A loud boom echoed out as the rune exploded, sending a tremendous shockwave that smashed onto Patriarch Yuanhua's sword beam. The white sword beam dimmed abruptly, as it was knocked tens of miles away by the rune. It swayed and struggled for a while, and could not get up again. Patriarch Yuan Hua's body trembled slightly, and he was forced to take tens of steps back by an invisible force. Both ancestral masters exchanged a glance, then sneered at the same time. Suddenly, all sorts of immortal techniques emerged one after another, and all sorts of flying swords, magical treasures, talismans, and thunder techniques were unleashed at the same time. For a moment, the void was filled with countless blinking lights, and all sorts of thunderclaps that shook the air and made everyone tremble. No one could see where exactly the two ancestral masters were. For experts at the level of Patriarch Yuan Hua and Reverend Huilin, the power of every attack they unleashed was extremely concentrated, and not too much of it would leak out. Therefore, although they were fighting fiercely, it did not affect Wu Qi and his companions at all. At most, they would only feel a strong wind blowing across their faces, but it did not cause any actual harm to them. Both of them fought for a while, and at last, they were both gasping for breath and soaked in sweat. Then, they stopped fighting almost at the same time. Separated by a distance of a few miles, both of them stared at each other for a while. Reverend Huilin did not show any intention to flee, and Patriarch Yuan Hua did not order the formation to be activated either. Relying on the advantage of being their home ground, he could make Reverend Huilin stay here. After panting for a while, both of them began to cough violently at the same time. Both of them had yet to recover from their serious injuries. Now that they had suddenly used up all their strength to fight, the immortal energy in their bodies had already been completely depleted. Furthermore, it had also affected their old injuries, which made them even more injured. They had lost a large amount of blood essence and vitality. When they finally managed to catch their breath, Patriarch Yuanhua pointed his trembling finger at Reverend Huilin and said with a cold grin, "Huilin, you can't tell right from wrong when it comes to arguing. If you want to talk about reason, we'll have a clear answer in the match hosted by Immortal Monarch 1.5 years later." Knowing Kuhi's character, Patriarch Yuanhua snorted coldly and turned his head away. It seemed he did not want to continue arguing about Immortal Kuhi's injury, as he looked down on Immortal Kuhi's character. Patriarch Yuanhua said disapprovingly, "We'll see whether I can defeat you or not when the time comes. Why waste your breath now?" Reverend Huilin rolled his eyes and said with a cold grin, "All right, Immortal Chuan, please be our witness and sign an official document. Using our sect as the wager, I have the same intention as well." A beam of golden light descended from the sky. Clad in a purple robe, Immortal Chuan descended from the sky with a smile on his face, holding a small and exquisite scroll in his hand. He said, "It is the best that both fellow immortals have the same intention. Using our own sect as the wager, such a grand bet is really TSK. Patriarch Yuanhua was taken aback. Staring at Reverend Huilin, he smiled and said, "So, it seems like you are here for a reason, old fart." Immortal Chuan nodded and said with a smile, "Patriarch Yuanhua, I've been waiting for you up there for more than half a day." It is true that Reverend Huilin has asked me to be the witness of the wager in advance." Patriarch Yuanhua and Reverend Huilin exchanged a glance, then burst out laughing at the same time. However, there was no warmth in their laughter. With Immortal Chuan as the witness, Patriarch Yuanhua and Reverend Huilin signed the official document at the same time. 1.5 years later, the disciples of both sects would fight to decide the ownership of the planet with the energy stone vein. 1.5 years later, the ancestral masters of both sects would fight to decide the allegiance of both sections. Promoted by some people with ulterior motives, the news of the wager was immediately spread across Pulyuo Heavenly Realm. Chapter 380. Reverend Huilin must have something to rely on. Otherwise, he would not come here alone and challenge Ancestral Master with such an excuse. Princess Zhanglu said with a frown as she stood on a cloud, flying gracefully like a heaven immortal. Wu Qi was sitting lazily next to her, flying forward on Princess Zhangli's cloud. He was also thinking about the same matter. 3 days had passed since Reverend Huilin attacked Green Cliff Planet. During this period, both Wu Qi and Princess Zhanglu were pondering about the meaning of Reverend Huilan's actions. Obviously, if immortal Yuan Hua had not proposed such a bet, Reverend Huilan would have proposed a bet that was almost the same. However, Patriarch Yuan Hua had 2 7th-grade spirit pills to rely on, which would allow him to fully recover his cultivation base in a few months. Reverend Huilan was also severely wounded, and his overall strength had dropped from 28th tier Heaven Immortal to 30th tier. So, what could he rely on to challenge Reverend Huilan? Princess Zhanglu and Wu Qi were pondering the question with a frown on their faces as they flew forward. After a long moment of pondering, Wu Qi shook his head and said, "Let's not think too much about it. Let's take care of ourselves first. Today, we are going to the Immortal Market on Green Cliff Planet for a stroll. As for the matters of Yuan Hua sect, they will be handled by those elders and Heaven Immortals. What does it have to do with us?" Shaking his head indifferently, Wu Qi said in a deep voice, "Even if Yuan Hua sect is completely wiped out, it has nothing to do with us." Princess Zhanglu nodded and gave up on the troublesome question. Her brows smoothed out as she sat happily next to Wu Qi, half of her body poking out of the cloud as she enjoyed the scenery of Green Cliff Planet with a smile on her face. Green Cliff Star was filled with towering mountains and lofty ridges. This was a planet where mountainous terrain occupied most of the landscape. Therefore, the secular countries here were very small, and the cities here were also small and exquisite. Looking down from the sky, one could see that the small, exquisite cities were embedded in the green mountains and clear waters, like bonsai made by expert craftsmen. It was extremely pleasing to the eye. Flying 2,000 miles to the west from Greenwood Peak, where Immortal Greenstaff's cave abode was located, there was an immortal market built by Yuan Hua sect. It was also the only place on Green Cliff Planet where immortal cultivators could exchange and trade. Because of Yuan Hua sect's reputation and overall strength in Puyo Heavenly Realm, this Green Cliff Immortal Market was very large in scale. Over 100,000 disciples from various immortal sects were stationed here all year round, and over 1 million mortals served them. Wu Qi had brought Princess Zhanglu to Green Cliff Immortal Market for a reason. He wanted to try his luck and see if he could find some rare treasures that could be useful to him. Myriad Immortals Planet was very rich in resources, but its production was limited, and it could not contain all the rare treasures found in the entire universe. Therefore, this immortal market was very useful to a cultivator like Wu Qi. Lord Xiansheng and Catfish Flood Dragon were flying a few miles behind them on a dark cloud. They were smart enough not to be the third wheel, but to let Wu Qi and Princess Zhanglu enjoy their private space. After flying slowly for nearly an hour, an immortal market surrounded by mountains came into their sight. Along a few majestic green mountains, rows of streets and shops were built one after another. Vaguely, one could see that the streets were bustling with activity, and a large number of cultivators were flying through the air on clouds. The rule of Green Cliff Immortal Market, no, all the immortal markets in the entire universe, was the same: cultivators could only fly on clouds, and not on swords. Because the lethality of sword beams was very strong, the sword energy and sword intent it carried might accidentally hurt the mortal servants in the immortal market. On the other hand, flying on clouds did not have such a problem. Unless one deliberately gathered water clouds to summon a thunderstorm, it would not threaten the safety of the immortal market. Wu Qi and his company randomly picked a street and landed. The passers-by gave them a glance as if they were used to it, then went back to their own business. There were thousands of immortal sects in Puyo Heavenly Realm, and each of them had their own shops and trading places. There were more than 100,000 cultivators and disciples stationed here, and the sky was filled with cultivators flying on clouds. The mortals were used to seeing people suddenly landing from the sky. Wu Qi greeted Lord Xiansheng and said, "Big brother, Zi Xian and I will go and find the shops that sell spirit birds and demon pets. You and Catfish Flood Dragon can go shopping." Lord Xiansheng nodded and said to Wu Qi with a smile, "Just go ahead, brother and sister-in-law. I know what to do." He pulled the sleeve of Catfish Flood Dragon, who was looking around, and brought her along the street with saliva dripping from the corner of her mouth. Wu Qi and Princess Zhanglu exchanged a glance and smiled. Arm in arm, they strolled slowly down the street. Green Cliff Immortal Market was well equipped, and there were eye-catching road signs on both sides. Following the signs, Wu Qi and Princess Zhanglu soon came to the shops that sold all kinds of rare spirit birds and demon beasts as demon pets. For immortal cultivators, their own cultivation base, magic power, divine abilities, mystic techniques, spirit pills, and magical treasures were very important. But, the function of demon pets should not be underestimated. A demon beast with a good bloodline and an innate divine ability was of great help to a cultivator. If a cultivator could adopt a good demon pet from a young age and treat it well, he would undoubtedly have a loyal and high-grade fighter. When he was just a little nascent soul cultivator, Reverend Yun, the founding ancestral master of Eminent Cloud Sect, the strongest immortal sect in Puyo Heavenly Realm, had unintentionally adopted a severely wounded little white snake. When he became a heaven immortal, the little white snake had transcended its thunder tribulation and become an immortal as well. When Reverend Yun became a 27th tier heaven immortal, the little white snake grew a pair of wings and transformed into an ancient snake, the snow-armored heaven-devouring python. On top of that, it possessed the overall strength of a 25th tier heaven immortal. Relying on this snow-armored heaven-devouring python, who treated Reverend Yun as his parent, Eminent Cloud Sect was able to sit firmly on the position of the #1 immortal sect in Puyo Heavenly Realm. A snow-armored heaven-devouring python with the overall strength of a 25th tier heaven immortal was not a match for a dozen immortals like Patriarch Yuan Hua, even if they joined forces. Most of the reason why Eminent Cloud Sect was able to gain the reputation of being the #1 immortal sect in Puyo Heavenly Realm was because of this extraordinary python. When Wu Qi refined immortal Xianyang on Shui Yuan planet, he obtained the bloodline of a fire element divine bird, the phoenix or Luan. He had never used this bloodline, as he wanted to find a good spirit bird for Princess Zhanglu to raise, then fuse the bloodline into the bird's body. With the power of the few ancient pill formulas in Wu Qi's hand, he could concoct some spirit herbs that could stimulate the bloodline, turning the spirit bird into an innate divine bird. Although Princess Zhongli's cultivation base was progressing at an incredible speed, the world of cultivators was a dangerous place, and people's hearts were unpredictable. As a result, Wu Qi was worried about Princess Zhongli's safety. Only with the protection of a divine bird could Wu Qi feel at ease. After strolling along the street for a while, Wu Qi chose a demon pet shop named Flapping Feather Pavilion, then brought Princess Zhonglu into the shop. Upon entering the pavilion, they were immediately greeted by the chirping of countless birds. On the other side, Princess Zhonglu gave a loud cry. Happily, she came before a few bird cages made from gold-threaded Phoebe wood and whistled softly, teasing a few nestlings who were huddled together in the cages and had yet to open their eyes. The shopkeeper of the shop, a middle-aged man who looked to be in his 40s and only had a cultivation base of early-stage Jean Dan, came forward to greet them attentively. His gaze swept across the waist medallions of Wu Qi and Princess Zhanglu, which indicated that they were disciples of Glorious Cloud Sect. Then he bowed respectfully and said, "Seniors, may I know what you would like to choose?" Princess Zhanglu tilted her head, completely ignoring the shopkeeper. With a smile on her face, she reached out her fingers through the gaps between the cages and gently stroked the few baby birds that were huddled together. She gently whistled, and the pleasant sound of the whistle made the tens of thousands of baby birds and adult demon birds in nearly 1,000 bird cages of various sizes in the Flapping Feather Pavilion's shop, which was nearly 1,000 feet in circumference, let out crisp chirps at the same time. With both hands clasped behind his back, Wu Qi looked at the shopkeeper and said in a straightforward manner, "For fire elemental demon birds, the purer and higher the grade of their bloodline, the better. It is best if they are baby birds or eggs. Adult ones. I don't want them." It was extremely difficult to tame an adult demon bird, and Wu Qi did not want to waste his time on it. With the bloodline of an innate divine bird, Wu Qi could easily make the baby bird grow at a very fast speed. So, why should he waste his time on it? The baby bird that was raised from a very young age would have feelings for Princess Zhanglu, just like a parent. A demon pet like this would be the most loyal. Wu Qi's words startled the shopkeeper, then he hurriedly bowed and said, "You're an expert, please come this way. We happen to have a flaming feathers sparrow that had just hatched 2 days ago. It's a true fire elemental spirit bird. Among all the 9th grade spirit birds, it's very rare for a flaming feathers sparrow to be ranked in the 3rd grade." Wu Qi followed the shopkeeper and came to a bird cage made from fire elemental energy stones located in the middle of the shop. A chubby baby bird, about the size of a hen and covered in fine red feathers, was seen curling up in a nest made from a few pieces of mid-grade fire elemental energy stones, squinting its eyes and chirping. Using the mystic eyes of universe, Wu Qi gave the baby bird a glance. It was indeed a fire elemental spirit bird, and its bloodline was not bad. It had a very faint bloodline of the lower-grade immortal bird, Brahma red sparrow. With such a spirit bird with the bloodline of an immortal bird, it was much easier for Wu Qi to fuse with the bloodline in his hand. Without bargaining, Wu Qi took out his storage bag and paid 500,000 lower-grade energy stones for the flaming feathers sparrow. Then, he paid an additional 100,000 lower-grade energy stones for a spirit breeding ring, which only had the internal space of a house. Only now did Wu Qi realize that Puyo Heavenly Realm was actually very poor. There were 10,000 longbow men squatting in his spirit breeding ring, and the ordinary spirit breeding ring here only had the internal space of a house. Fortunately, before he left Myriad Immortals' planet, he had plundered a great amount of natural treasures from the Great Eastern Ocean, which allowed him to expand the spirit breeding ring to his heart's content. Otherwise, Wu Qi was really worried that the flaming feathers sparrow would suffer in such a small space. Right after the transaction was completed, Wu Qi shoved the flaming feathers sparrow into the spirit breeding ring he bought. All of a sudden, he heard a commotion coming from outside. Good heavens! She swallowed it without making a sound. That fish-headed demon is so fierce. How dare she swallow a living man in the street? Looks like we have a good show to watch. The man she swallowed is the grandnephew of the chief elder of Eminent Cloud Sect's Luo Spirit Palace. A fish-headed demon swallowed a human. The human she swallowed was someone from Eminent Cloud Sect? Wu Qi felt dizzy. Without hesitation, he grabbed Princess Zhang Lu and ran out of the shop. Chapter 381. 3 streets away from Flapping Feather Pavilion, Catfish Flood Dragon and Lord Xianqing were surrounded by a crowd in front of a 9-storied pavilion that was nearly 1,000 feet wide, with each story being 90 feet tall. Countless onlookers were pointing their fingers and talking, whispering to those who came from behind, describing how Catfish Flood Dragon opened her mouth and swallowed Yun Wuqi, the disciple of Eminent Cloud's sect who was stationed on Green Cliff Planet. Yun Wuqi, an early-stage nascent soul cultivator, was swallowed alive by Catfish Flood Dragon without being able to put up any resistance. In the eyes of the onlookers, Catfish Flood Dragon was simply a ferocious great demon, an evildoer who came out of nowhere to stir up trouble. And, on top of that, there was a medallion of Yunhua Sect's disciple hanging on her belt, which surprised all the onlookers. When Wu Qi and Princess Zhang Lu arrived, nearly 100 cultivators, whose cultivation base ranged from early-stage nascent divinity realm to peak-stage Xiantian realm, were surrounding Lord Xianqing and Catfish Flood Dragon with their swords drawn. The only early-stage nascent divinity cultivator was gnashing his teeth and roaring furiously with bloodshot eyes, "I don't care who you are, you've killed young Master Yun, and that's a capital crime. 10,000 deaths are not enough to atone for your great crime." Lord Xianqing's face was gloomy, and he did not say a word. He spread his arms and shielded the pair of tiny girls who were shivering behind him. Catfish Flood Dragon was shaking her big head, giggling at the early-stage nascent divinity disciple from Eminent Cloud's sect and said, "I didn't kill him, I ate him. Blood must be shed when killing someone, but I didn't see any blood when eating someone. So, I didn't kill him, I ate him." Catfish Flood Dragon opened her mouth and clasped her hands behind her back as she said, "That young master of yours is not a good man. Not only did he steal the spirit herb from the little girl, he even wanted to use her as a cultivation vessel. I don't think I'm a fool." What good would it be to use a little girl as a cultivation vessel? She would still be turned into a dried corpse after a few days of torment. That's not going to work. She lightly patted the two girls, who were shivering and hiding behind Lord Xiansheng, and said smilingly, "Look. How could such a good little girl be harmed by that rascal young master of yours?" Wu Qi pushed the crowd aside violently, and happened to hear Catfish Flood Dragon's words. Abruptly, those onlookers were pushed aside by Wu Qi. A few angry Jin Dan cultivators opened their mouths and cursed, "Where did this stupid bird come from? Why are you pushing me?" These few human immortals of Jin Dan were cursing viciously. Wu Qi glared at them, but before he could say anything, Princess Zhanglu had already picked up a burly man and gave him a series of slaps. After that, Princess Zhanglu casually tossed him to the side, using a forbidden technique she inherited from her mother's bloodline, throwing him tens of miles away. Lightly clapping her hands, Princess Zhanglu rolled her eyes and snorted coldly, "Who else is not convinced? This empress can convince him wholeheartedly." A five-colored auspicious gleam could be seen wheeling faintly in her eyes. A tremendous spiritual pressure was exerted on all the onlookers, making them bow their heads and not dare to make a sound. Wu Qi gave Princess Zhanglu a thumbs up and praised, "Well done." Princess Zhanglu smiled sweetly. She pulled out a white silk handkerchief and wiped her hands, then threw it to the ground. After that, she followed Wu Qi and walked into the crowd, standing next to Catfish Flood Dragon. Wu Qi gave the surrounding disciples of Eminent Cloud Sect a glance and said coldly, "What is going on? What is Eminent Cloud Sect, Luo Ling Pavilion trying to do? Are you trying to kill a disciple of Yuanhua Sect?" The early-stage nascent divinity cultivator from Eminent Cloud Sect cried out sternly, "Junior, your disciple has killed young Master Yun." "You." With a blink, a shadow darted out from behind Wu Qi's back. It was a celestial fiend puppet that shot out and gave the early-stage nascent divinity cultivator a fierce slap on the face. Slap! Half of the cultivator's face was smashed, and he fell heavily to the ground while howling miserably. Nascent divinity puppets were precious treasures created by ancient almighty experts, used to guard the sect. After being painstakingly trained by Wu Qi, these puppets had cultivated the celestial fiend battle the heaven script to the peak stage of nascent soul realm, which was equal to Wu Qi's false nascent realm. On top of that, they were nourished by the innate earth element energy essence, and had devoured countless rare metals and materials in Great Yen Dynasty's secret vault. As a result, their fleshly body was at least 100 times stronger than Wu Qi's, which was strengthened by the dark Yin true water, let alone an ordinary early-stage nascent divinity cultivator. The slap was like smashing a piece of tofu with an iron hammer. Of course, the iron hammer would be fine, but the tofu would be smashed into pieces. The nascent divinity cultivator, whose face was smashed and smashed, pointed his finger at Wu Qi and cried out with a trembling voice, How dare you?" Wu Qi stared coldly at the nascent divinity cultivator. With a thought in his mind, the celestial fiend puppet suddenly dashed out, grabbed the nascent divinity cultivator's neck, and twisted it into a dough twist. A bloody nascent divinity flew up into the sky while howling miserably. Suddenly, a large tongue came rolling over from the side. Catfish Flood Dragon stuck out the tongue and pulled the cultivator's nascent divinity into her mouth, then swallowed it back into her stomach. Patting her belly, Catfish Flood Dragon said with a silly voice, "Not bad, the taste is not bad. It tastes better than that Yun Wuqi who had his body emptied." After allowing Catfish Flood Dragon to swallow a nascent divinity cultivator from Eminent Cloud Sect in front of so many people, Wu Qi squeezed out a smile. With hands clasped behind his back, he turned to look at those Eminent Cloud Sect cultivators, who were dumbfounded and trembling with fear, and said, "Actually, what I want to say is that this is a misunderstanding." A nascent divinity cultivator from Eminent Cloud Sect sprung to his feet and roared furiously, "It is not a misunderstanding." Another celestial fiend puppet sprung out from behind Wu Qi's back. Like a lightning bolt, it came before the nascent divinity cultivator, punched through his heart, and pulled out his nascent soul. Catfish Flood Dragon did not hesitate, and swallowed the nascent soul into her stomach as well. With a smile on his face, Wuqi nodded and said, "I've told you, this is a fucking misunderstanding." A cold gleam flashed in Wuqi's eyes as he said in a cold voice, "I've told you, this is a misunderstanding. Does anyone have any other opinion?" With a twitch of his finger, 100 Jean Dan grade-long bow men rushed out from the spirit breeding ring, roaring furiously as they strode towards the surrounding streets and completely sealed off the entire street. One after another, shadows flashed out from behind Wuqi's back, followed by the rest of the celestial fiend puppets. They transformed into Taoists with different appearances, riding on clouds and patrolling in the sky. Wuqi spread his divine will and enveloped the nearby streets in a flash, keeping track of everyone's every move. A bright gleam flickered in Princess Zhongli's eyes as she began to recite an incantation under her breath. Immediately, a vast dark mist rose from the ground, and countless faintly discernible ghosts soared into the sky with shrill cries, completely surrounding the nearby streets. The people from Eminent Cloud's sect and Luo Ling Pavilion were struck dumb. They stared in horror at Wuqi, who had sealed off the entire street, and cried out sternly, What are you trying to do? This is Green Cliff Immortal Market. What are you trying to do? There are so many fellow Taoists here, and they won't let you go." Wuqi snorted coldly, shook his head helplessly, and said with a sigh, "There are always some rascals under the heaven. They did some rascals, and in the end, they were killed by someone, and then they provoked even more rascals. My friend has eaten your young master Yun, and Eminent Cloud's sect will definitely not let this go. What else can I do? Eminent Cloud's sect, I really don't have the strength to fight against them now." A chill ran down the spines of the surrounding cultivators. They suddenly began to regret why they came so quickly to watch the show. What was Wuqi trying to do by sealing off the entire street? Was he trying to silence them? But, this was Green Cliff Immortal Market, and he could not possibly kill all the witnesses. Unless he bathed Green Cliff Immortal Market in blood and killed everyone, he would never be able to escape from the revenge of Eminent Cloud's sect. Wuqi bowed his head and pondered for a brief moment. Then, he fished out a large amount of writing brush, ink, paper, and inkstone from Black Dragon's spirit ring. "Those who do not want to die," he said with a deep voice, "write down everything that happened, including how Yun Wuqi bullied the innocent, and how Catfish Flood Dragon tried to protect the victim, but was forced to defend herself by Yun Wuqi. I'll recite it verbally, and you will write it down. If you make a single mistake, I'll kill you." All the surrounding cultivators rolled their eyes at the same time. "If you recite it verbally, we will write it down. Doesn't that mean whatever you say will happen?" Suddenly, a Eminent Cloud sect's disciple from Luo Ling Pavilion cried out, "Everyone, run in different directions." Before his words could fade away, with a thought from Wuqi, a tremendous magnetic force rushed whistling out from under the ground and tightly trapped the disciple's body. A tremendous pressure that was over 1,000 times stronger than the initial stage Jean Dan cultivator could only let out a miserable howl as his body collapsed abruptly, turning into a meat patty that spread out on the ground. Blood splattered in all directions, as his Jean Dan was crushed into a thin piece of meat patty by the tremendous magnetic force. Wuqi looked at these Eminent Cloud sect's disciples with a gentle expression, smiled, and said, "Your great young master Yun has robbed the spirit herbs and abducted innocent girls. You are just a bunch of rascals who help the evildoer do evil. I've killed all of you, and I don't feel guilty at all. Either you write down the details of what happened according to what I told you, or, all of you will die here." All the cultivators of Luo Ling Pavilion looked at each other. While they were still in a daze, Wuqi moved his fingertip and unleashed another sword beam, chopping off the heads of 3 peak stage Xiantian cultivators. Blood sprayed out from their necks and sprayed into the air. No one dared to say another word. Nearly 1,000 cultivators lay flat on their stomachs on the ground, holding brush and ink in their hands. Following Wuqi's words, they began to write down the details of what happened, stroke by stroke. According to Wuqi's description, Yun Wuqi had robbed the spirit herbs and abducted innocent girls. He was truly an unforgivable villain. When he was killed, all the onlookers applauded and cheered loudly. It was especially true for those eminent cloud sect's disciples from Luoling Pavilion. Under Wu Qi's coercion, they wrote down all the similar filthy deeds that Yun Wuqi had done in the past in great detail. On the other side, Princess Zhanglu was holding a pair of twin girls who looked to be in their early teens and comforting them with kind words. She pulled out a handkerchief and wiped the cheeks of the two girls. They were a pair of beautiful, adorable, and lively girls with a pair of dewy pearls. Their cultivation base was very shallow, roughly at the level of Qi refining realm. Their little hands were covered with calluses and wounds, which were obviously the marks of climbing over cliffs in the forest while grabbing wild grasses and vines. Wu Qi looked at the two young girls, who were too frightened to move, holding Princess Zhang Li's little hands. He threw his head back and roared furiously into the sky, "Yun Wuqi, you are not a fucking human. How could you harm a little girl like this? A deranged scum like you should have been killed long ago." Wu Qi's roar was filled with righteousness and righteousness. On the other hand, those cultivators who were writing their testimonies on the ground nearly burst into tears. If Wu Qi used their testimonies as evidence and stamped them with a bloody handprint, he would have completely offended eminent cloud sect. Right when these cultivators were about to cry and wished they could commit suicide, several hundred sword beams came shooting over from a distance. Taoist White Sparrow's voice rang out from afar, "Who dares to stir up trouble in Green Cliff Immortal Market?" A few muffled snorts rang out as the longbow men Wu Qi sent outside were forced back by the sword beams. Their leader, Long Yuan, was covered in blood from the sword beams. Wu Qi's face turned cold. With a wave of his hand, over 1,000 testimonies fell into his palm. Chapter 382. White Sparrow was in an extremely bad mood. Not to mention the old grudge between him and Patriarch Jiang Yun from 100,000 years ago. After all, it involved the face of his patriarch. If he brought it up again and again, it would be like slapping his patriarch in the face. That would make Priest Min hold a grudge against him. But this time, there were new and old grudges. Taoist White Sparrow still remembered that when he left Yuanhua sect, he had a cultivation base of peak-stage nascent divinity realm, just like Patriarch Jiang Yun. After losing the care of his sect, he wandered around the world alone. It was not easy for him to come across an immortal fortuitous encounter and obtain 2 immortal artifacts left behind by ancient immortals. He successfully overcame the lightning tribulation and became a heavenly immortal. After that, he founded his own sect and became the master of a sect. After 100,000 years of hard work, he had trained a group of elite disciples and dominated a remote small planet. His days were very comfortable. Then, his master, Mo Wan, suddenly came to him, and told him that Yuanhua sect and Huiling sect had agreed on a life and death match. It was a great opportunity for him to earn some merits. White Sparrow immediately led 110 carefully selected disciples and followed Mo Wan to the Green Cliff planet. He had originally hoped to make a great contribution so that he could return to the sect smoothly and receive the teachings of the returning in action scripture. However, that damned enemy, Patriarch Jiang Yun, had brought 100 peak stage nascent soul realm experts and 10 peak stage nascent divinity realm experts with him. On the other hand, he only had 3 to 5 peak stage nascent divinity disciples, and over 70 peak stage nascent soul disciples. However, compared to Patriarch Jiang Yun, the gap between their overall strength was too huge, and his own cultivation base was not as strong as Patriarch Jiang Yun. Therefore, the opportunity to represent Yuanhua sect in the match was given to Patriarch Jiang Yun. Although Bai Ke was also an outer sect elder like Patriarch Jiang Yun, Patriarch Jiang Yun was able to lead his disciples to perform meritorious deeds and receive rewards, while Bai Ke was sent to Green Cliff Immortal Market to be a manager. Of course, this was a very lucrative position. If it wasn't for his master's care, Bai Ke wouldn't have had the chance to become the managing elder of Green Cliff Immortal Market. He was furious no matter how he thought about it. Jiang Yun was going to perform meritorious deeds and be rewarded, while he was squatting here dealing with a bunch of cultivators. For the past 3 days, Bai Ke had been in a terrible mood. Therefore, when he heard that there was a fish-headed demon eating people in the street, he immediately thought of Patriarch Jiang Yun's disciple, the catfish flood dragon. What kind of demon dared to stir up trouble on Green Cliff Planet? The native fiendish demons of Green Cliff Planet had all been killed in the past millions of years. Which fiendish demon would dare to cause trouble in Green Cliff Immortal Market? It must be that disciple of Patriarch Jiang Yun. Jiang Yun, you've hit the edge of a knife. With a complacent, ferocious smile on his face, White Sparrow excitedly summoned all the disciples he brought to Green Cliff Planet. Together with several hundred Yuanhua sect disciples who were stationed in Green Cliff Immortal Market, they stepped on their flying swords and rushed towards the scene of the incident. When he was still 2 to 3 miles away from the Luo Ling Pavilion, a few tall and sturdy men, who were more than 30 feet tall, suddenly rushed out from the street below, holding lightning bolts in their hands and striking down at his head. No matter what, White Sparrow had the cultivation base of a heaven immortal. Facing the thunderous attack from the longbow men, he only gave a cold laugh and casually thrust out a sword beam, shattering the thunderbolts. The sword beam whistled through the air, and Long Yuan and his companions were knocked flying backward in a sorry state, with blood spraying out of their bodies. White Sparrow was surprised that his sword beam failed to kill Long Yuan and his companions, who only had the cultivation base of Jin Dan. His mood immediately turned worse. He gave a furious roar and thrust out his sword beam, intending to behead Long Yuan and his companions. But suddenly, a white light came sweeping over from behind, and Long Yuan and the other burly men suddenly disappeared without a trace. A middle-aged Taoist, clad in a green Taoist robe, his face expressionless and his facial features ordinary, stood before White Sparrow and blocked his way. "My master is dealing with some private affairs. Stop right there." The green-clothed Taoist was none other than one of Wu Qi's celestial fiend puppets. He stood before White Sparrow with a cold and lifeless expression. The puppet pointed his right hand out at a slanted angle, and a 3 feet long, bronze, ancient-looking sword hovered a few feet in front of his fingertip. Its sharp edge was gleaming with a hazy gleam under the sunlight. White Sparrow gave the puppet a cold glance. How could a mere peak-stage nascent soul cultivator be so presumptuous in front of him? He even disdained to attack the puppet. "Kill him!" he cried out sternly, then pointed his finger at the puppet. An early-stage nascent divinity cultivator standing behind White Sparrow snorted coldly. Disdainfully, he waved his hand and unleashed a spinning beam of water beam. The crescent-shaped beam of water beam tore through the air with an ear-splitting whistling noise, hitting accurately on the puppet's chest. However, the puppet did not budge even a little bit, despite sending out a large number of sparks. White Sparrow and the group of disciples were taken aback. But, before they could cry out, the puppet's body flashed and came before the nascent divinity cultivator. Crack! The puppet stretched out his left arm and grabbed the neck of the dumbfounded early-stage nascent divinity cultivator, then casually squeezed and crushed his neck as if he was pinching a chicken. Before the cultivator's nascent divinity could escape from his body, the puppet swung his right arm and thrust the sword beam into the cultivator's forehead, piercing through his spiritual ocean and stabbing into his nascent divinity. A dark green gleam emerged in the cultivator's spiritual ocean, sucking his nascent divinity and all his blood essence into the puppet's body. After being replenished by the early-stage nascent divinity cultivator's blood essence and nascent divinity, the puppet's ferocious aura rose to a higher level. Vaguely, it showed a sign of breaking through peak-stage nascent soul realm and stepping into nascent divinity realm. He let out a long cry and shook his left arm, shooting out another ancient-looking green flying sword. Then, he controlled the 2 flying swords with both hands, and his body began to spin rapidly. Amidst a series of hissing noises, like a huge wheel made of blades, the puppet plunged into the crowd of White Sparrow's disciples, leaving behind a large sheet of cold gleam. The sound of blades cutting bodies kept echoing out, while miserable howls towered into the sky. In just a blink of an eye, a dozen of White Sparrow's disciples had their arms and legs chopped off, while howling and retreating hastily. White Sparrow's body was trembling with rage. He roared furiously and did not have the time to rush to the scene to investigate the incident of the fish-headed demon eating humans. Instead, a colorful cloud soared up into the sky from the top of his head, amidst which came a strangely shaped banner pieced together with countless bone-shaped jade slips. As the banner fluttered, the surrounding void trembled, and the eyes of all the cultivators who were hovering in midair to watch the show suddenly turned dark. Their souls were thrown into confusion, and they fell backward to the ground. Like dumplings falling into a pot, several thousand cultivators fell to the ground with their arms and legs broken. Some had their arms and legs broken, while some were unlucky enough to have their necks broken. Although the injuries were not fatal, they did not feel good at all. The banner was one of the 2 immortal items White Sparrow was lucky enough to obtain, the Jade-Bone's soul-searching banner. As long as it was a creature with a soul, once it was fluttered, its soul would be shaken, and no matter how profound the creature's cultivation base was, it would still make him dizzy. If it was a cultivator whose cultivation base was not as strong as Taoist White Sparrow, it would capture every single one of them, and no one could escape from it. However, the celestial fiend puppet just gave the banner a glance as if nothing had happened, then stretched out his hand and grabbed towards the Jade-Bone's soul-searching banner. Clang! The celestial fiend puppet grabbed the long handle of the Jade-Bone's soul-searching banner, which was carved out of a dark green jade and shaped like a spine. Then, he activated the celestial fiend Battle the Heaven script. A bizarre force that came with a very strong and murderous aura of fiend, as well as a very strong primitive aura, filled the puppet's body. Abruptly, his strength grew to a frightening level. With a grab and a shake, a large sheet of bright light shone from the Jade-Bone's soul-searching banner, which was about to break away from the colorful cloud transformed from White Sparrow's immortal soul, and was nearly snatched away by the celestial fiend puppet. White Sparrow cried out in shock. A cloud rose from the top of his head, and without any hesitation, he transformed his immortal soul into a dense cloud and rushed out, wrapping the Jade-Bone's soul-searching banner tightly. The long banner was a treasure left behind by an ancient immortal, and its grade was very high. White Sparrow did not have the chance to truly refine it, but by relying on the fact that he had been living with it for 100,000 years, he had reached a tacit understanding with the sleeping item spirit in it, allowing him to borrow a tiny bit of its insignificant power. If the celestial fiend puppet snatched it away, the sleeping item spirit in the banner would never come back to find Taoist White Sparrow after traveling for thousands of miles. Damned evildoer! Let go of me! White Sparrow opened his mouth and shot out a large sheet of bright light. A strange-shaped wheel, about 3 feet in diameter and shaped like a wheel, with its edges densely packed with razor-sharp blades, shot out. For a moment, the sky was filled with countless white blades that shot in all directions. The countless blades transformed into a tornado that stood 100 miles tall and 1,000 feet wide, wrapping around the celestial fiend puppet. Loud clanging noises rang out as countless sparks burst out from the puppet's body, while countless deep and shallow cuts were left on its body by the wheel. But, no matter how the wheel sliced and sliced, after flying several hundred feet away, those body parts would immediately turn into liquid droplets that looked like mercury, then quickly flew back to the puppet and fused back into its body. The puppet let out an unpleasant laughter, while green ghost flames burst out from its eyes, stretching nearly 10 feet away as it stared at White Sparrow, baring its teeth and staring at him. Wu Qi, who was collecting the confessions, laughed with surprise. After absorbing countless strange metals from Great Yen Dynasty's secret vault, the power of these celestial fiend puppets had gone beyond his expectation. Not only did they possess the cultivation base of peak-stage nascent soul realm, but the strength of their fleshly body could actually withstand the attack of an immortal item. The ancient almighty experts who crafted these celestial fiend puppets were indeed extraordinary, and they truly deserved to be the extraordinary treasures used to safeguard the fate of their sects. Grinning coldly, the 17 celestial fiend puppets stationed in the 4 directions shot toward White Sparrow at the same time, leaving numerous afterimages in the air. Sword beams pierced through the air, while fist winds shook and shook the void. The sudden attack of 18 celestial fiend puppets had caught White Sparrow unprepared. Hastily, he produced a small purple-gold pagoda and unleashed a light barrier to protect himself. However, as he was only focused on defending, 3 of the celestial fiend puppets grabbed the Jade Bone's soul-searching flag, and together with the first puppet, they pulled the flag up and broke free from the control of White Sparrow's immortal soul. The strength of these celestial fiend puppets could uproot mountains, and they possessed an immense divine strength. How could White Sparrow resist their tremendous strength with the power of his immortal soul? Amidst jarring and strange howls, the 18 celestial fiend puppets suddenly merged together, transforming into a blurry green figure that shot out and disappeared in just a blink of an eye. The Jade Bone's soul-searching flag was taken away by the puppets, and White Sparrow could no longer sense its existence. Taoist White Sparrow threw his head back and roared furiously, jumping and leaping madly in the sky. His heart was convulsing and cramping, and he nearly burst into tears because of the heartache. Years ago, it was with the help of the Jade Bone's soul-searching flag that he managed to transcend his heaven-immortal thunder tribulation. He knew very well that the flag had an immense power, and it was not an ordinary immortal item. But now, it was forcibly taken away by someone. On top of that, it was a group of freaks with the cultivation base of peak stage nascent soul realm. Taoist White Sparrow let out a long cry. While he was about to teleport away and chase after the celestial fiend puppets, Wu Qi came shooting over and stood in front of him. Wu Qi grabbed White Sparrow's sleeve and roared, "Uncle Master, you have to uphold justice for me. Those people from Eminent Cloud's sect have abused their power to bully others and dominate the market. They must be severely punished. You have to be our witness. We were forced to defend ourselves, and that's why we killed those people from Eminent Cloud's sect." Taoist White Sparrow was so angry that his vision turned dark. "You actually killed those people from Eminent Cloud's sect?" You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.